Welcome everyone. I'm letting all the participants join and then we will start the meeting. So we will do 1 short minute and then we will start. I noticed that people are starting to say hello in the chat. I'd invite you to click on, I don't know if you're able to write to the other attendees or not. If that's possible, then it would be most welcome if you said hello to everyone. Okay, so we've hit 250 participants online and it keeps going up, but I'd like to kick off. Penny, you ready? Great. So on behalf of myself, my name's Kirsty Reed and I'm from FPIA, which is the European Federation for Pharmaceutical Industries and Associations. I'd like to welcome you here, co-hosting with the RSPCA. I'll introduce you to Penny very soon. And we're going to be discussing with you today the Animal Welfare Body, where we've headlined it the Catalyst for Progress. We will be also running this meeting and we're very welcome to have here representatives also from FALASA and IFAT to join us and to help us through the discussion. So next slide, please. We can go on to the next slide already. Just some normal housekeeping, as with any meeting, just to let you all know that apart from the speakers, so the panelists, all cameras are disabled and the participants have all been muted. This meeting will be recorded. Unfortunately, if you have a problem with that, we'd have to ask you to leave the meeting, but I think that you could only join it if you'd agreed anyway previously to have it recorded. Now, during the meeting, we would like to ensure that it is as interactive as possible. Because of the very high turnout of participants, the system we're using, of course, doesn't allow us to have all the participants unmuted to have a full engagement. We'll do our best to make sure that you can all participate throughout the meeting as much as possible. And therefore, we ask you to please mostly put all your questions in the question section, and we will do our best as we go through the discussions and also through writing to answer as many questions. But also, if you have any statements to make, you can use the chat function, and we will try and keep an eye on everything. During the discussions, you may feel that you would like to say something, and if this is the case, please, I believe there is a function to raise your hand. Please do push that, and we will move to as many as we can people who would like to ask their questions verbally. Okay, and it will be our function to unmute you, so you will not be able to unmute yourselves. So that being said, let's move on to the most exciting part. I'd like to welcome everyone here today. Just going to have a look. We've over 316 participants, but we have 510 registered. So this shows you the importance of the topic and the interest of people. With that, we have over 21 countries represented by the different affiliations, and people are representing across all boards. We have academia, industry, regulators, veterinarians, NGOs, CROs, competent authorities, the commissioners here. So, and also within all of that, we have people representing a number of different functions within their organizations. So I'd like to use this opportunity to thank you for all being here and for participating. I wish you an exciting meeting. I will now hand over to my co-host. So Penny Hawkins is the head of the Animals in Science Department at the RSPCA, which is the Royal Society for the Protection and Care of Animals in the UK. It's a science-based animal welfare organization, and her team works to promote the full implementation of the 3 Rs with replacement as the ultimate goal. So very much aligned with the goal of the directive on the protection of animals used for scientific purposes. And they also help to ensure a robust ethical review of animal use. So over to you, Penny.
Thank you so much, Kirsty, and hello everybody. It's wonderful to see so many of you have joined us this afternoon from all over the continent and beyond. Just for the record, I'm in Worthing in South England and it is very, very rainy, so I'm very envious of all of you who've got nice, hot, sunny days. So this webinar has a number of aims. We would like to help you advance and harmonise current good practice among animal welfare bodies. We also wanted to look to see whether there were some ways that we could address the outstanding issues that are still faced by some animal welfare bodies and that are preventing them from effectively delivering their core and wider tasks. We wanted to enable you to network as best you can online, and we hope that in the discussion sessions you'll have some opportunities to share your experiences and good practice and maybe troubleshoot with one another as well if some of you are having issues. And this is all part, again, of trying to achieve greater openness and communication with respect to how animal welfare bodies operate and how the directive is implemented as a whole. Next. So we hung this on the European Commission's review of the directive, which took place in 2017. We thought this would be a good basis for putting this webinar together. And I'm sure many of you will have seen the statements about the animal welfare body in this review. So yes, there are significant benefits of the animal welfare body, as we all know, including particularly better experimental design, better refinement of procedures, and particularly a contribution to improving the culture of care within animal research and testing establishments. But unfortunately, there are still some ongoing issues, and these were identified in the review of the directive. So there's not enough involvement of designated veterinarians. Not all core tasks are still fulfilled. There's clarity needed on roles and responsibilities, and there's particularly a need for sufficient resources and empowerment. And those were the findings of the review of the directive, and they've also been borne out by the results of the survey that we're going to present later on, which Linda Horan of EFAT is going to present for us. So that's the sort of the background to our thinking behind this webinar and what we'd like to achieve. And I really hope there'll be something there for everybody and that you can all go away feeling inspired and empowered to go back to your establishments and really help your AWERB to be the catalyst for progress that many already are and that they all really should be. So without further ado, we can start the first session. If we can have the next slide, please. So this is on animal welfare body tasks and the culture of care. And your chair for this is Samuel Vidal. He is the Animal Welfare Officer at Vet AgroSoup, the Veterinary School of Lyon. He's also the Vice President for International Affairs at FALASA. So over to you, Samuel. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation. On behalf of the Executive Committee of FALASA, I really congratulate RSPCA and EFPIA to have the initiative of organizing such a meeting, very interesting, with about a topic which is, according to us, really strategic for the improvements and the implementation on the ground, on the field, in all our laboratories of replacement, reduction, and refinement, of course. Just to be really brief in my presentation, FALASA, as you know, certainly, is a federation of 29 associations in 29 countries, big national associations, but also emerging associations with a spirit of collaborations between associations. And we all try to promote a good and ethical use of animals in research and education. And we hope that FELASA can contribute in the implementation of all of this, and in particular can help the animal welfare bodies, providing them technical, scientific information, resources like working group reports, for example, published in laboratory animals, and also whatnot, meetings when we organize our meetings every 3 years. I will quickly leave the floor to very interesting speakers. And first of all, two talks with a very large subject about the animal welfare bodies. And then we will have quicker talks and shorter talks dedicated on the missions. First of all, I will leave the floor to Sally Robinson, who works in AstraZeneca and also speaking on behalf of EFPIA. So Sally, this is your turn.
Thank you very much. So hopefully you can all see that. This session, you're going to have 5 lightning talks fairly soon about the tasks of an animal welfare body. And actually, it would be really useful, I think, when those talks are going ahead, to think about how they fundamentally underpin a culture of care. And perhaps just to think about the Commission Expert Working Group document, which is available to all on the Animal Welfare Body and the National Committee, where it's very clear that an effective animal welfare body has a very strong role in promoting a culture of care. So please do think about that as we talk about the various tasks. But today, we just wanted to share the launch of this leaflet. This is available on the FPIA website. The leaflet will be there in 2 versions eventually. At the moment, it's in leaflet form so that it can be printed off and folded over as a leaflet. And it's called Living Your Culture of Care. And we produced this really to help people that haven't necessarily actively got involved with promoting and driving a culture of care within their establishments. The leaflet obviously is a bit too small for you to see the detail on the screen, but what it focuses on, it talks about culture of care, what it is and why it is important. It talks about who's involved with a culture of care, which is essentially everybody that is directly involved with working with animals, and those that are also indirectly involved, can be wide reaching out into management, facility support, scientists, etc. We talk about the sort of 4 areas that we believe are key and fundamental to culture of care. And that really involves supporting staff, animal welfare, openness and transparency. And so yeah, those 4 areas are in that circle at the bottom. And then we've built this leaflet to provide a number of resources, which you can see in the references section, that talk about some really good references connected to culture of care, and also some good websites like the Norocopa website. But the focus of the leaflet is a publication that was released in 2019 that was driven by the FPIA Research and Animal Welfare Group, where we started off thinking about, is it possible to provide a structure for people to think about culture of care, to assess their culture of care, and if you like, to use that framework as a way to drive forward improvements. And that's what that publication tries to develop. And it focuses on what we call our 5 category framework, which you can see here. And that is company values, strategic approach, implementing structures, staff support, and animal care and welfare. And within that framework, under each of those categories, we have identified a number of good practice indicators and some tips. So what we've tried to do in this leaflet is then take that and say, well, how would you put that into practice? And there are some examples there of how you can get started in terms of assessing the culture of care at your own establishment, the types of things you can do. For example, we point you to a survey on the FPIA website that might be a useful starting point for discussion with staff. And we talk through how it might be possible to use this 5 category framework that we've developed in our publication. So that leaflet's launched today. And whilst we do focus on our publication, because it's an FPIA leaflet, in the references section, what we're desperately trying to do is obviously link you through to a whole set of resources in this area connected to culture of care. and particularly references where you can perhaps take our framework, which is around human-centric things that humans can put in place, and then link that into objective measures of animal welfare and 3R's progress. So again, that's in the reference section, so you can see some good references there. So that's a little, if you like, prompt for our leaflet available today. Please do take a look at it, but particularly as we talk through the next set of lightning talks, perhaps think about how those tasks would link into a culture of care as well. That's me.
Okay, thank you very much. Just to remind you that if ever you have questions in the attendance, so don't hesitate, you can use the functions offered to you in the question and answers function in the Zoom. Then I will introduce to you Piet Diekers, who works in Janssen and who will talk on behalf of the Animal Welfare Body Network in Belgium about the benefit of having an animal welfare body network. So the floor is for you.
Yes, thank you, Samuel, and for this great opportunity to share what we have done in Belgium so far. So next slide, please. When the EU directive became effective in 2010, well, we all went through the same process. It had to be translated in the national legislation, and in Belgium, this was finalized in 2013. And well, more or less the same was taken over as what was specified in the directive. In Belgium, we have 6 tasks, but this is, well, more or less the same as what is being described in the 5 tasks in the EU directive. Another important reference document of the early days after the start of AWBs still is the EU consensus document, a very valuable reference still. Giving a lot of examples of how tasks can be fulfilled, but not really setting minimum expectations. So what did we see in practice in Belgium? A lot of establishments still struggling how to fit the AWB in their existing structures, because let's be honest, a lot of the tasks of the AWB often were already performed by, for instance, a central LAS group or by the local ethics committee or dedicated people. But also we saw that tasks often were still understood in a very different way. So we saw a lot of differences, and this was identified by BECLAS, the Belgian Council for Laboratory Animal Science, that facilitated a kickoff workshop. Next, please. So what does the platform in Belgium looks like? Currently, it is set up as a working group of our National Association of Laboratory Animal Science. And this has great advantages because this allows to tap into the administrative support of this organization. For instance, if you want to organize a workshop, it is convenient to have this kind of support. We, of course, aim at being representative for all AWBs in Belgium. This means situated in the 3 different regions, with, of course, a representation of all stakeholders involved, academia and industry. We do not have a system where we have membership of each individual AWB in Belgium, but we work with a core team where we have the same representation with at least one BECLAS board member also part of this core team, but currently there are more. Next. Next, please. So we have set 4 main objectives for this platform. The first is to promote networking and exchange of information. The second is to provide training. The third is about making sure that information is available to people. And a fourth one is about setting up good practices and, if possible, also partner with the local authorities or the national committee. We have been successful, and I will show you several examples of the first 3 objectives, but the fourth one is still something on our to-do list. So when I was first asked to present the AWB platform of Belgium, I was a bit reluctant because there is still room for improvement of how we operate. But looking back, well, we do have a lot of examples where we had success. For instance, we were able to organize a lot of workshops, and we created a discussion forum. So next slide, please. How did we get started? Via a kickoff workshop. Here too, we work together with the local authorities because we asked them to reach out to all establishments in Belgium and to invite them to delegate some delegates to participate in a one-day kickoff workshop. There we had some invited speakers, like for instance, someone from our neighbors from the Netherlands, that already started with an animal welfare body platform, to have them explain what this was all about. But most of the day we spent in breakout sessions. Next click, please. Yeah, in breakout sessions, where we discussed a lot of case studies and really managed to collect a lot of information, relevant information about challenges and opportunities for improvement, which allowed us, to open the eyes, I think, of all participants to see the need to talk to each other and to have exchange of good ideas and opportunities. Click. So, of course, at the end of the day, we were able to address our main question, is an AWB platform beneficial? And there was a vast majority that was really convinced of the added value. And next slide, please. You can also see that simultaneously, we also had a very good idea of what exactly the AWB should be doing. And you see in green, the two main objectives: networking. And the second one, and this is maybe a bit bizarre, is about training. But we learned that, well, a lot of people were also still seeking for more training opportunities, and specifically training in, for instance, also technical skills, to have more expertise when walking around in the lab, when having to give advice to people. Next slide. So, I talked about successful workshops. Well, because of the question about more training in technical skills, one of the first initiatives we took was a workshop specifically on techniques and work practices with mice in the lab, where we looked in very practical issues, but really invited people to share their experiences. You may click. For instance, we talked about blood sampling techniques, and yes, of course, if you look at good practices, we all talk about micro sampling, but sometimes there still is a need to make use of larger blood volumes. So we really try to discuss these kind of stuff where people from AWBs are confronted with how to deal with it, what are alternatives, etc. We also, for instance, challenge them with questions, and sometimes even the organizers of the workshop were not sure about the exact answer, but this was exactly the purpose of that workshop. Next slide. We continued in 2009-10 with a workshop about tasks and responsibilities, a little bit the same format as the kickoff workshop, where we had practical cases that were discussed, also direct questions. The workshop was a bit short, I think, but it allowed the participants to go home with some lessons learned. You may click 2 times. For instance, you see a list. Please click. You see a list of ways that were brought up by the participants, how the effectiveness of an AWB can be increased. Next slide, please. So I already talked about the internet forum. So a discussion forum where people can post questions. We decided to not restrict access to AWB members, but to open it up for all people involved in animal care and use. It is on the BECLAS website, so accessible to all BECLAS members. That's why we allow Dutch, French, and also English, with the main aim to promote the 3 R's. It has not yet been used very intensively, but when I've always received feedback. And for instance, when we had to take tissues from euthanized mini pigs, well, I was able, for instance, to identify other establishments that were also interested to make use of the same animals. Next, please. So I would be lying if everything is already perfect. But for instance, when we get started, we really reached out to people to join the core team and really convince them. But currently our core team, I noticed that several people, well, most of us really have very busy agendas. So it's difficult to really have a lot of active drivers of the platform. For instance, last year, we have not been able to organize, at least the previous slide, we have not been able to organize a lot of activities. While this is a pity, because especially during the COVID pandemic, well, there were a lot of opportunities to have added value for AWBs. I already talked about the AWB membership, but and we also have, of course, the specific Belgian situation. And then the last slide. So I really believe that there is a future for the AWB platform to remain the pacemaker within Belgium, to continue to bring people together, to help set up good practices. And of course, we all share the same EU directive to also collaborate and combine forces with our European colleagues. And well, I chose this picture of the Belgium team. I now know since yesterday that I should have chosen the Danish team because they showed to be a much better team and we needed the help of someone very extraordinary. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you also to demonstrate the interest of having a collaborative work spirit to improve the quality of the animal welfare in the labs. As we need to go quick, we will go quickly to the next slide, please. Yes, and what will happen that we will go in detail and we will have one speaker for one of each of the 5 functions of the animal welfare bodies. And then all of the speakers will introduce themselves and then will develop their vision of all of these tasks. Please don't hesitate, feed the question and answers tool, and this will be really helpful next to know exactly in which field you would like to go further. So I will immediately leave the floor to Viola, not to lose time, and to develop the first, about the first task of the animal welfare body. Thank you.
Thank you, Samuel. Thank you for introducing me, and thank you to the organizers, including the Culture of Care Network. That is where I'm part of, and I'm representing Trinity. Next slide, please. My name is Viola. I'm the Animal Care and Welfare Officer in Trinity College Dublin, and I'm also the facility manager here. So I'm sitting in the Animal Welfare Body of Trinity as the Animal Care and Welfare Officer. And we realized that it's true that we need to provide advices to staff and to users, but at the same time, we need a tool so that the Irish legislation could be fulfilled. Here in Ireland, we need to have 8 hours of CPDs recorded in the individual training record, and this is valid both for staff and users. So we were thinking of what tool we could use, and next slide, please. we decided to go for animal welfare body lunch seminars. These are seminars, very short, I mean, maximum 45, 50 minutes that are run quarterly. We run them online. We started them last year during the pandemic, so the online was the only option that we had. And we decided to address as first point one of the topic that we daily run through in our units, because we have many scientists who are using age animals. And we decided to work with, to address the aging rodents as first topic. And the idea was to give the opportunity both to users to say why they're using aging rodents, which will actually be helpful for the technical stuff to understand why we keep the age animals, but also to empower the technical staff. So both technical officers who are looking after these animals and veterinarians to explain what's the which are the characteristics that are actually specific to this kind of animals. And this was actually the idea was actually also to strengthen the bond between users and staff, so that there could be a continuous communication between the two parts. Next slide, please. So later on, then we continued, as I said, quarterly, and then we decided to address topics that every time were coming up. One was the genotyping, because there are many genetically altered mice strains here, and we incur many issues related to the genotyping, either not done correctly, or where actually people were taking too long to do them. So that would address also how to avoid the waste of animals. And in this case, we decided to go just with the external speakers. As for the implementation of the non-aversive handling technique, we already implemented it in-house, but we wanted somebody from outside to basically convince our users that it would be good. So we invited Johnny Rogan. Next slide, please. And in order to provide the opportunity also to new users who were not able to be part of the seminars when we run them, we are recording the seminars and we are uploading them in the college system, which is Blackboard, but it's the same as Moodle in the UK. So people, new users, either they're new or they're say already users of the unit, but they didn't have the opportunity to be present during the seminar, they can go through the webinars, and then they can go through the registration on the individual authorization training records. Thank you to the training officer. And we find that this is, at least we started 1 year ago, and we see it seems to be quite useful, both for the users and for the staff. And yeah, that's our experience here. Next slide, please. And I just want to thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, Viola.
Okay. Come on. Excuse me.
Next slide, please. So I'm Nairi Denison. I'm the University Veterinary Surgeon at the University of Dundee. Thank you to the organisers for inviting me, and to the Culture of Care Network for providing me this opportunity. So task 2, which I'm talking about, is advising the staff and on the application and the requirement of the 3 Rs, and keeping them informed on technical and scientific developments concerning those 3 Rs applications. So with this, the animal welfare body's a body which really needs to share information and have limbs, and all good bodies have limbs. So what we do at Dundee is we've looked at the EU guidance and things that we want to try and achieve, and then we've worked out how best we think we can do this. In terms of linking to the National Committee, we, as all of the animal welfare bodies in the UK, are members of a particular hub. Ours is the Scottish hub. And we have a member from the National Committee. That means that we can link forward to them and give ideas into the national network, but equally to receive ideas back the other way. And we take those ideas back with us to Dundee and share them with the people there. It's really important to improve communication between scientists and the animal technicians and caretakers. The way that we do this is we have a number of different internal mechanisms. We have scientist to technician talks and also technician to scientist talks. So it's really important that both sets of people understand what they're doing. It's important the technicians understand what the scientists are trying to achieve. And it's important that the scientists understand where the technicians have issues with specific models and their ideas for how these might be improved. And actually from this, we've managed to work on a number of 3Rs projects together with the technicians and the scientists working alongside each other to the benefit of both, and obviously to the animals. We promote laboratory animal science. We do this in a number of ways. We have user group meetings and user group lists on the ground. So where we find that there are important papers or bits of information, we make sure that those are disseminated. We have internal 3Rs days and seminars where we pick up particular ideas. So a couple of years ago, that would have been things like the tunnel and cup handling for mice. And we promote those. And we have also promote external 3Rs events, which we're aware of going on throughout these lists to encourage people to engage, because it's important that they understand that there is things like welfare science and people are looking at looking at how these things work in terms of a scientific rationale, which is always the best way of persuading people to move things forward. Education and training is essential. We have ongoing training on responsibilities, the relevant refined methods that we're using within Dundee, on study design to help promote refinement and reduction, and also on alternatives. And we also use specific expertise. So within our community, we have somebody who's particularly interested in study design. We happen to do our protocols on a study-by-study basis, and we try and encourage people to speak to this study design person or to statisticians to ensure that they're actually designing their studies correctly. We also have some people who've got in vitro technique experience, and we obviously try and promote those wherever possible. Next slide, please. I don't know if the system's decided to, thank you. So as part of this on the ground, those are the sort of principles of what we're doing. You need to support your champions. There are always people who are really keen to move these things forward and use this team to actually then empower people to make changes. We empower our technicians. Our technicians are really interested in trying to make improvements. So we've teamed them up sometimes with the behavioural researchers to actually look at the effects of what they're doing and their changes to make sure that those changes are to the benefit of the animals. It also means that if we have a solid scientific basis, we can promote that externally via posters and presentations, and it helps persuade people that this is a good way to go in terms of the scientists. The Article 24 and 25 people are the people who are involved in overseeing welfare, the people who should be promoting information specific to the species, and also those who are dealing with training and competence. It's really important those people on the ground are empowered to ensure that they can actually do their jobs and promote the 3Rs. It's really important as well to be open to all people and ideas. Ideas come from the funniest places, and it's really important that you listen to people and you give them channels where they can feed that in. Some of the people we find that involving is really critical are the early career scientists. They tend to be very keen and also very flexible. So I've got Sam here, who worked with one of our technicians on improving a scoring system for pain in one of his studies, and Fiona, who was involved in a study that we were looking at the effects of male and female mice in terms of how they interact with male and female handlers. And the final pair of hands is Alison, who was looking at refined blood sampling methods, so unrestrained mice. And this leads on to the next bit, which is about how you promote your benefits. So for Alison, as a scientist, she's working in the diabetes field. It's really important that the blood glucose measurement she has is accurate. And so the graph on the left out of those two show that you've actually got a statistical difference in the glucose levels when you restrain or don't restrain mice for blood sampling. That's really important for her science. But if you look at the graph on the right, that shows the difference between the cortisol levels. So not only does it make a difference to her science, but it clearly makes a difference to how stressed or otherwise the mice were. And the bottom image, which is a video, is to remind me to say to people that you need to keep changing. So this was our most recent, this is our wrap playroom, and we've always done quite a lot of work with Sprague Dawleys, but sorry, with the hoodies, but the Spragues here, they've never been particularly positive about the playroom, and one of the technicians decided to do additional tickling with them, and we've got these behaviours that you're seeing, which is the sort of like popcorning that you get with wild rats. If you remember back to Manuel Burdoy's seminal sort of video that they did in the Oxford group to show. So we've actually managed to get more interaction, and people keep changing their ideas and keep moving forward, which is really critical. So you never leave it where it is, you always keep moving. Next slide, please. And so my final slide is simply to say, you've got to be a team. You can't do this on your own. It's really important that you involve everybody and get people in this together, which very much chimes with the culture of care that Sally was talking about earlier. So we can do it together if we do that. And if anyone wants to contact me with any questions, that's my email address. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
And the next slide, please. Right, hello everyone, I'm Thomas Bertelsen. I'm a veterinarian at Novo Nordisk, and I'm also heading up our animal welfare body. I would like to share a couple of internal operational processes that we have established. Next, please. Humane endpoints. This is a topic that we see that some of our colleagues frequently struggle with to grasp what is this concept. Some of them refer to the OECD guideline, but this is very general, and it's not very specific, and you cannot really, well, act on them in a very precise manner. So we have issued a one-pager describing our principles on humane endpoints, and we call them principles, but they have the same value as sort of a corporate policy, but we call it differently when it's issued from our animal welfare body. In order to guide our colleagues, we have also issued a guidance document, which is not a one-pager, but 8-10 pages. It has instructions on how, when, why to use the humane endpoints, and it also provides examples on how you should apply these. Next. Likewise, we have this on severity, animals experiencing severe suffering. Likewise, we have this one-pager on our principles, and then also we have the guidance document with instructions and examples, so we can better tell people how they should work actively to reduce severe suffering. This guidance document, as well as the previous one, it's a living document, so we continuously adjust it with the instructions and the examples. Next slide, please. Following severity, we also monitor the number of animals that we score as having experienced severe suffering. You see here from 2019 that a little less than 300 animals were scored with a severe suffering, a little more than 1%. So we took a look at all our data, and we identified a handful of licenses where the number of animals scored with severe covered almost all of these. Then we took dialogues with the relevant license holders, and first of all, we did check, is the scoring correct? And I believe that all of us are more or less struggling with some of these categories. Then we were looking at why did the severe suffering occur? What had been done so far? and then we had a dialogue on what are the obstacles to reduce this severe suffering. And finally, we set out a plan to overcome the issues and to reduce or potentially end the severe suffering. And this is actually where we are now. We have launched the action plans, and we are soon going to evaluate the effect of these. That's it.
Oh, there we go. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Alan White. I'm chair of the GSK UK Animal Welfare Body. I'd like to thank EFPIA and the RSPCA and the Culture of Care Network for this opportunity to talk to you today. And I'm going to be talking about the core task that's around following the development and outcomes of projects. And this is more than just thoughts and reflections, as I've put on the slide there. This is actually a bit of a sort of a case study as well, which I hopefully will be useful for everyone. Next slide, please. Okay, so in the UK, we have two ways of following the outcomes of projects. We have retrospective assessment and retrospective review. The assessment is formally mandated and required to be reported back to our regulators in the UK. And that's mandated for projects that would involve larger species, such as dogs, non-human primates, and projects that would have severe protocols in. The severe classification protocols. Retrospective review, this is subject to assessment by the regulator, but not formally reported. So this is something we have to do for all projects, and obviously this is a key task for us, as it is for everyone. So both of these aim to produce the same outcomes. By review, we learn, we share, and we improve animal welfare and thereby the science. And it's a very simple equation: good welfare equals good science. But being a person that likes to ask lots of questions and like to ask myself lots of questions, I thought, what more can we do? Is there more we can do? Next slide, please. Okay, so after action review. So this is a process that we put in place and we currently have in place. And the initial reaction that a lot of people had was, my goodness, not another review process. But my response was, yes, but a value-added one, and we really had to demonstrate and prove that it was a value-added one. So with this process, we conduct this at the individual study level. We identify these opportunities early, and they're discussed and agreed in advance with the project leader and the scientists. We have a clear set of expectations for meetings, process outcomes, and behaviours, and for this, a chair for this is essential to get those quality outcomes. So what we do in this is we focus on new and challenging models. Obviously, we can't do this for every single study, but we focus on the new challenging models. Any models that have high severity, upper moderate, severe severity, where there's the greatest opportunities to implement refinements. Where they may be, but also slightly more retrospectively is when things don't go according to plan. So it could be a study that maybe we didn't consider to be a top focus or a top priority for our after action review process, but because things didn't go as planned, then we can use this process to go back and look at that and see if we can find out root causes and then change things for the better. Next slide, please. Okay, so some benefits and outcomes of this process. So what this process allowed us to do is it ensures focus on the finer study details. It's a more holistic approach than we might necessarily have got from our more holistic project license review approach. We could get more granular identification of potential improvements. It engaged all relevant parties. It's a very inclusive team approach. It's one team pulling in the same direction, and this is really important because it builds trust, develops relationships, and helps ease those tensions that we all come across, I'm sure, where we have this tension between welfare and the science. More inclusive decision making between scientists and care staff and those conducting the procedures. I think this is really important as well, that we're all involved in how we take things forward. So some of the real sort of key outcomes that we got, and this is where what I'm most proud of. Things like adoption and refinement of clinical science scoring sheets to refine humane endpoints. Adopting these, getting these introduced into studies where they may not have been used historically. A constant refinement process as the studies develop to make these as predictive as possible of helping us to detect and refine earlier humane endpoints possibly. The improved quality of study protocols, the wording and instructions. This can be quite important as well. It's really important that everybody on the study knows exactly what they're doing and when they're doing it, and they can read through that in a clear and unambiguous way. Reassessment of optimal body weight recording. There's several ways of doing this, and we found that the particular studies that we looked at, there's you could take things as an average, there's a maximum attained weight, a study start weight using age match controls, and I think through this process we can help identify what is the most optimal way of recording within this study. Was it the most optimal way? Is there a better way of doing it? Did we detect the most appropriate amount of weight loss in this particular study at the right time? And particularly in one study, is provision of rehydration options. So this was a really fantastic win that I was really proud of, because and proud of the team for getting here, because it was initially contraindicated to this study. It was a case of you cannot provide hydration in this study because it is going to affect the scientific outcomes. And we worked together and we worked as a team, and we got to a point where we've been able to introduce hydration into these studies. It hasn't affected scientific outcomes. We've seen a reduction in weight loss, and we've got a much more refined model. So I'll just wrap up by saying I think the headline benefits for me from this is a general shift in attitude to thinking on 3Rs matters in some of our community, which is a fantastic step forward. And I think all of these points, particularly about the one team moving in the same direction, being inclusive, having a diverse team that involves the care staff, the scientists, the vets, members of AWERB, all working together, pulling in the same direction, that really talks to our culture of care and enhancement of our culture of care. Okay, that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Hi, everybody. My name is Monique Janssens. Thanks for having me on this brilliant afternoon. I'm the communications advisor of the Animal Welfare Body of Utrecht, both of university and the medical center. I'm also a member of the National Committee, and I have a background in ethics. I think that's an important aspect of this short talk. My partner, Pascal van Loo, in this project couldn't make it. She's our animal welfare officer. Next slide, please. So I guess most of you will know the legal framework about rehoming animals. When they're still alive after experiments, they have to be healthy, there should be no danger to people, animals, or the environment. And of course, their well-being has to be safeguarded. But at the same time, I think most of you know as well that the focus is mainly on dogs and cats and sometimes other large animals, but there's not so much interest in small animals like mice and rats. So next slide, please. We were talking about this. We said, well, ethically, there's no difference between a dog or a rat, actually. So why doesn't anyone bother about the rodents? And then in 2019, we had our annual meeting with the director of the NGO Animal Rights, which is a Netherlands and Belgium-based organization. And there we always seek mutual ground. And in this case, the mutual ground was that we all thought it very important to start rehoming rodents. We were very positive about this. We looked for some extra partners, like Het Knagertje, which is a rodent shelter in The Hague, which is less than an hour driving from Utrecht. And the Dutch SPCA, the Dierenbescherming, was also willing to help. Next slide, please. So actually, it was internally within the organization that we found many concerns, misconceptions, and fallacies. The most interesting, I thought, was that we talked to some people who said, well, it's no use starting any project on this. There's too few rodents that will be alive after the experiments that you can rehome. And then someone else said, oh, how are you going to manage that? It's too many. It will be a lot of work. You will never find enough homes to take them to. And there were also many concerns, of course, very, very important concerns about will they be taken care of very well at home, and maybe they will be fed to snakes or to other animals. And then the final concern was from our internal group that does plastination of dead animals to use them in education. They said, well, we need the cadavers. Next slide, please. But nevertheless, we wanted to start a pilot just to get a feeling of how it worked. So we made a framework, and the most important aspects of that framework are these. The animals should, of course, be healthy. We do females and males of rats, but for mice, we decided only to start with females because, as you know, male mice, they can give problems in groups. They have to have the right age, not too old, not after 1 year, because then the people at home will start getting problems with the health of the animals very soon. They have to be rehomed in existing groups. Of course, the people at home have to have large cages and lots of enrichment. We give advice on care of the animals. And the last one is the most interesting thing, I think, because from our point of view, we thought there shouldn't be any cats and dogs in the house because that would give too much stress to the animals. But at the same time, we found out that the people who want to do this, who love animals, well, in most cases, they have cats or dogs. So the new rule is now that they can be in the house, but not in the same room. Next slide, please. So the rehoming, this is part of the pilot because the pilot went over the year. But in 2020, we did these numbers, more than 200 mice, almost 400 rats and 6 hamsters. They all found a new home. People were very happy with them. And I think the animals were happy too. And I think in 2021, the numbers will be much higher. Next slide, please. So one of the concerns of other universities we're talking to are the media. I'm never very concerned about the media. I'm the communications officer, so I talk to them and I can explain everything when it's okay. But actually, we had a lot of positive pieces in the media. They were really, really very positive, and also on social media, people were so supportive. So that really made us happy. Next slide, please. So the final conclusion is, if people say, why bother? We say, well, why not? The animals count ethically. It's their life. They're all individuals, and every animal we can save counts. That's it for me. Thank you.
I found those talks very interesting, Samuel. I've been watching the various chats coming in, the questions, and all the questions being answered as we move through the discussion. But I was wondering, do you have any questions to our speakers? May I ask that all the speakers who've just spoken do put on their cameras? I'll also pick on Susanna Lohimis from the Commission to put on your camera, because we'd like to also engage with you. So Samuel.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, because all the examples of implementation of the 5 missions were very interesting. And we had some questions. The first one was reminding of the structural components of the culture of care that has been presented first. But it has been. But perhaps you could come back on it. And if ever EFPIA, I suppose all the answers are in the EFPIA leaflet. but perhaps you could come back on it. Sally?
Okay, yeah, no, absolutely. I think in the answer to the question online, myself and Thierry have shared the publication that FP have produced on assessing culture of care, and the 5 categories that we proposed with the good practice indicators against them were company values, a strategic approach at the establishment level. There was a big section on implementation structures. There was a section on staff support, and then the final section, of course, was on animal welfare and procedures. So they were the 5 sort of categories where we put the indicators of good practice.
Okay, thank you. Well, and I will take the freedom to ask a really personal question, but for all the panelists and for all the speakers here, we have during all these missions presented very interesting topics about advising about the 3 R's, about advising about the animal welfare of the animals and the information about the species, but also establishing and reviewing processes, in particular in terms of communication and reporting animal welfare, and also following the monitoring of their outcomes. So there are different topics, different verbs, advising, but also following and reviewing. So it can raise the question of the authority of the animal welfare body. And according to you, what is your feeling and your experience of being able to work among any institution, having to promote animal welfare, wanting to do it? And do you think it is you are sufficiently empowered in your activity? And do you think the animal welfare body in all countries has sufficient power to do it? So perhaps we could start with, if ever, one of the speakers want to take the lead immediately, or is my question?
I mean, I'll comment. I'll make a quick comment on this, which is I think it's really critical that the management of whatever the organisation is behind the animal welfare body. So for this to be successful, for the animal welfare body to be taken seriously, this comes back actually to Sally's culture of care and the fact that the establishment and the management of it has to be behind it. And where that's successful, I think it's a very powerful use. Certainly the experience of where I am in Dundee is that the animal welfare body, if we require certain training and we're supported by management, and if people don't do it, then they lose the ability to do their research. So we're powerful enough to do that. Sally?
Yeah, I was just going to add, I don't know if it's the same in other member states, so I'd really appreciate someone else saying if it's different. But certainly in the UK, the role is advisory, and the accountable person is the person that's, if you like, the named person responsible for compliance for the establishment. And I think it's important to remember advisory, I think it absolutely requires senior support. Otherwise, it just becomes an advisory role that can be ignored. So I guess I'm just building on what Nairi said. Be interesting to hear, I guess, from other member states, though, about whether it's the animal welfare body itself that has the authority or the named person responsible for compliance. Because I think that in the UK, the body advises the named person responsible for compliance.
Okay, and and in any country, do these animal welfare bodies or for the advice regarding the 3 R's, do you, for example, advise you to help writing the projects in particular before applying for the authorizations?
We do at Novo Nordisk. I think it's quite difficult for most of us to speak very generally for the country where we are sitting, but in terms of what you just asked for, helping to make a good application for a license, we do that. In terms of empowerment at Novo Nordisk, yes, it is an advisory role, but you really need a scientific justification for turning our advice down. So my feeling is that yes, we are empowered.
Samuel, I see there's a question from Nuno Franca from Portugal. I'm asking a question specifically to Monique. He asks how to ensure that animals are properly taken care of after rehoming. Who's responsible for the veterinary care and who should pay for it? Some may live a considerable long time and it may be challenging to follow them after they leave the lab, but aren't we ultimately responsible to what happens even after they go somewhere else? So this is on the responsibility after you've rehomed.
Yeah, it's a very good question. It was and is absolutely our concern as well. We got a lot of help from the organizations we're working with, because in the first place, they are looking for adoption addresses on their social media. And in most cases, it's people they know in some way or another. It's the normal people they have contact with. So we can be rather sure that these people are really animal friendly people. And the shelter we're working with, they have also their own procedures already of how to talk to the people when the people come to their offices, to the shelter to ask for animals. Yeah, they really do a deep interview to find out whether they think that those people will take care of the animals very well. And of course, they say that whatever happens to the animal, if something's not normal, you should call us and you can have it checked with our vet, or you should go to your own vet. And as far as we know now, we do some surveys now and then on all these addresses. As far as we know now, the people do it. And sometimes they call us just to ask what to do. So yeah, actually that's it. We work with the shelter and with the NGOs, and they do a lot of this work because we couldn't do that extra.
I'm going to
just add to that. We do rats and mice directly with individuals because we don't do it via a shelter. So we actually have paperwork which people sign which says that they are taking responsibility for taking over the care and welfare and veterinary care, so that they will take it to an appropriate vet. Although we continue, as Monique said, to offer sort of contact and support if they want. And we actually find lots of people send us lots of photos of their happy rats at home. So we tend to keep in contact with the positive side as well, which is nice.
Thank you. I see there are actually all the questions that are coming through are linked to the rehoming. So not to have to cover them all now, but maybe look at opportunities to type in some answers. But I'm going to read through a few and give those online who are also involved in rehoming to give some of the responses. But there's questions on the issue of rehoming. What are your thoughts on the rehoming of SPF rodents? What about sterilization or neutering of the rehomed animals? There's also a question on the opportunity to link rehoming centers with the animal testing facilities to help support the rehoming procedures. There's also about where can we get more information about rehoming? How did you acquire so many people which were willing to take rats and mice, for example, the question. So there are a number of questions on rehoming. Anyone who wishes to say something. I see Penny, you have your hand up, is that?
Yes, it is, because in the discussion session later, we were going to give people the opportunity to vote on which task they would like to discuss if there was time. And I'd left rehoming off because I thought it might be a bit niche, but given that so many people are interested, perhaps we could give people the opportunity to vote that up if they'd like to talk about it. We could discuss it more later. Yeah. Okay, so I'll ask Tatiana to add that to the poll.
Shall I take two of the most simple questions? Yeah, we don't do neutering because we only we rehome them in groups of the same gender. So that works for us. And how we find homes, that is, we've been very happy that the Dutch SPCA, they have a national website on which all animals in shelters are, and you can find them by name and photograph, etc. And they have made for us an extra section on which they say These are ex-laboratory animals, so we don't have to make a photo of each mouse, fortunately. But from that point, you can find the right way to say you want to rehome an animal, and and on social media. So these organizations, the NGOs we work with, they do a lot of exposure on social media, and that's how it works.
Okay, perfect. And globally, can I ask you the question of, because we have had very interesting examples of very active animal welfare bodies, in particular for the follow-up of the outcomes of the studies and this kind of systematic retrospective assessment of any procedure. For this particular example, does it mean that you have more resources now since the implementation of the directive, or do you work with the same resources? Oh. I'm really sorry.
Who would like to take that one up?
Mm-hmm. Since the implementation, well, because when we implemented the animal welfare, the directive, people were talking about like administrative burden, or well, let's say we have already sufficient work, etc., etc. Finally, you described some very active animal welfare bodies, as I said, more for the follow-up of the studies in particular, but also for the promotion of the 3 Rs. And according to you, I don't know who would like to explain, if you work with the same resources, if you found time, or if finally it was at the end a useful time and a profitable time, I would say.
At Novo Nordisk, we already had a similar body in place before the directive. Yeah. And I think that we were basically handling most of the tasks that are laid down in the directive. But I mean, we have a flexible approach in terms of resources, because there's a technological, there's an animal welfare development all the time. And we try to cover these aspects as best as possible. I don't know if that answers your question, but as I said, we had a body similar in place before the directive, so it hasn't changed that much.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I would like to add that, well, at Janssen, it's a similar story. So a lot of working groups were already installed, but I do see that people that already have another job to do, the animal caretakers, the researchers that are also involved in the animal welfare body, that they do need to spend more time in this engagement. So this may not be underestimated, I think.
Yeah. And in particular, for what you did as when you described your animal welfare body network in Belgium, it was very interesting, and it seemed, as you said, you were not fully satisfied of the result. It is still on progress. We had a question, like a proposition of having like a European. Would you think interesting having like? It was a question by Delphine Denet, I suppose. Like having a European collaboration among the animal welfare networks in Europe?
Well, the idea of the EU directive is to have more alignment. So it would be a bit bizarre if we would all start inventing our own national way how to proceed with this. However, I do think that local or national platforms are very relevant, because we also underestimate the difficulties people sometimes have to talk in English, especially animal caretakers. And well, they need to be able to talk in their own language and discuss the issues they are confronted with.
Yes.
And I'd like to ask a question. Susanna, you've been listening to the discussions. You've heard the various presentations given by both industry and academia on the different tasks of the animal welfare body. When the directive was adopted and this was all under discussion, do you feel that we've moved forward? Does it make you pleased to see that progress has been made? It would be good to hear your feedback coming from sort of the regulator side on what your expectations were when the 5 tasks were developed as part of the directive.
Thank you and good afternoon, everybody. Yes, I absolutely feel that there's a positive echo coming out. Now, whether everybody's advancing the same speed, that really depends on the resources given to the animal welfare bodies. It depends on the support given to the national committees who are supporting then the animal welfare bodies. But at least when we did the directive review and also when partly looking at it during the implementation report, in both cases, we got really interesting and nice feedback about the benefits of the animal welfare bodies. So I do feel it's going in the right direction. And I think for me personally, probably the most interesting and the most positive development, it's not necessarily something concrete, but it's the fact that people are communicating. They're starting to work out of these silos of I'm a researcher, I'm a designated veterinarian, I'm an animal caretaker, and there's much more of this collaborative approach in different places. Now, establishing culture of care, for example, is it different from industry side versus academia? I think it will be more difficult in an academic setting where you have research groups that come and go. And so you're probably lacking a little bit of the stability in the structures internally to support animal welfare bodies and their work. You have another aspect, which is contract research organizations. There again, the challenges might be different. In a real caring fatigue, if you just quickly pushing through toxicological testing. And so we have different elements which are playing, but I think for me, the underlying positive aspect is really that people have started talking. They've started talking amongst themselves, between different establishments, within the same language group. Somebody was saying about having an EU platform, and we've discussed a couple of times already, and we would be happy to sort of help that. But oftentimes the question is, as you were saying, Pete, it's about the problem of language. People want to speak their own language, and especially if we talk about animal caretaker level, they don't necessarily feel comfortable to start discussing in a forum where everybody's using German or French or English. So we have to take that into account. But I've heard, for example, in the German-speaking area, there are areas where animal welfare bodies have started discussing amongst themselves across the borders. So I think all of that is very relevant and positive, and I hope it continues that way. If you go back to the question of empowerment authorities later, I may have a couple of comments on that one later on.
In terms of the EU collaboration or sharing experiences, I acknowledge that technicians or others may have a need to speak their own language, but that does not exclude that there is some exchanging of information and approaches across the member states. And I think that when we look at these statistics, I'm quite puzzled to see, for example, the vast differences in the percentage of animals experience severe suffering. And I don't think that is fully scientifically justified. So I think we could certainly improve alignment on this. I'm fully supporting this.
I agree with that. Just one little word of caution concerning statistics and, for example, element of severity. On one hand, we can just look at simply what are the severities in different countries. But I think it is important to then immediately look at the same time of the use profile of the country. It is very different from a country where you mainly do basic research and education and training versus a country that does 60% of the work is on toxicological regulatory testing, efficacy and safety testing. So we need to look at the data that we have, but we have to be intelligent in ways we interpret that. But I agree, severity classification in general and the reporting and following up is one of the biggest nuts to crack and to get the harmonization. And I think FELASA and FBA and others have done excellent job in terms of pulling this together through these roadshows. And I hope that the e-module that's now available will also be able to help a little bit in that. But it's a work in progress, definitely.
Yes, I have another question for Susanna and my other colleagues here. So we have seen a lot of fantastic examples of how the AWB can fulfill tasks, but we know that there is a lot of difference between AWBs, how they do things. From a regulatory point of view, is this considered as a problem or not? This huge variation in how AWBs work.
Do you want to let somebody else say something?
Well, it's a difficult question, I suppose.
I guess I can say from the directive perspective is that because we are writing a legislation for the whole of Europe and for each and every situation, the minimum requirements had to be left really low, because if we have an establishment that uses during 2 months of the year fish in mild procedures, and you have an establishment that uses thousands or tens of thousands of animals every single day, what we write in the directive, the minimum requirements have to be able to be fulfilled by everybody. So the minimum requirements are really low. It has the tasks, and I think the understanding has to be on the output. Are they achieving what it is aimed to achieve? And that may vary from one place to another. From our perspective, we know that a lot of animal welfare bodies are assisting the preparation of the project application. In some cases, they might even be involved in the work of the competent authority. And from that perspective, I mean, we don't have any problems if added tasks are added to the role. And I think they can have a beautiful input into the project application at the application drawing phase. However, that shouldn't be on the expense of the core tasks that they've been assigned for. So for me, through the animal welfare bodies, I always describe it as like the pumping heart. It gets the 3 R's and starts pumping blood into the heart and the system and keeps it alive. And that those tasks that were involved in the directive, in the writing of the directive, that didn't involve the project application review. But there's no problem in adding that. So all these elements will then result in different solutions. You know, how do you have a big, you have a small one? Do you have a designated veterinarian, which is a permanent member? In some cases, only advising. How many people you have participating? All that can vary. But I think the question is, are they being able to perform the task within the environment that they are in? And are they acting as this, you know, pumping heart?
Okay. So yes, so if we summarize, it's like a risk assessment according to the sensitivity of the situation, and every situation can be adapted. Well, thank you very much. I don't know if we.
I think we're out of time for this session.
Excuse me. Yes, we are reaching the end of the session, I'm supposing. No.
I think we've got, we can give 5 minutes for people to quickly have a stretch their legs, have something to drink, and we will start again. Mine says 23. Let's start at 12:30, so just 5 minutes after the foreseen time, if that's okay. I won't say 1:30 or 2:30 because it depends on where are you based around the world.
Okay, thank you very much, you all speakers, and see you after the break. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think it's time to continue. If Tatiana, yes, slides are up. And Penny, I hand over to yourself.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Kirsty. And thank you to everybody who's come back. We've been hovering around the 400 mark throughout this meeting, which is just fantastic. Some people have commented that they'd like a hashtag. We're seeing lots of nice tweets about this meeting. So there's a suggested hashtag for you in the chat box there, hashtag AWB Progress, which I hope is acceptable for everyone. So on to session 2 then. This is going to be about challenges and solutions to achieving an effective animal welfare body. And as I mentioned earlier, we've based this partly on the 2017 revision of the directive, but also on the outcome of a survey that the RSPCA and FPA did, just to see how people felt their animal welfare bodies were getting on currently with achieving their tasks, and to see what sort of issues they had. And I know many of you watching this webinar will have participated in this survey, so thank you very much for that. I'm now going to hand over to Linda Horan to present some key outcomes of that survey, and then after that we're going to go straight to a panel discussion to take us up to 2:35 or 3:35, I think, if you're on the continent, to get us on track. So Linda is the manager of a unit at the University of Strathclyde in Scotland. She's also a member of its animal welfare body. She is the current chair of the United Kingdom Institute of Animal Technologists, and she's a member of the European Federation of Animal Technologists. A key remit of EFAT is to promote the harmonisation of education and training for animal technologists throughout Europe, and to establish the highest standards of laboratory animal care and welfare by exchanging information and ideas. So with that, I will hand over to Linda. Thank you very much, Linda.
Thanks, Penny. Delighted to be invited here to this meeting on behalf of EFAT, and it's fabulous to see so many people from all around Europe and further afield. I noticed somebody joining us from Canada, so that's amazing that we're all looking forward to progress our AWERBs. What I'm going to present for you is a summary of a survey that was sent out, and a lot of the responses have been collated, so it's an overview of the responses from this survey. So there were 104 people who responded from many places around the country. You'll see that slide further on. Members of the AWERB, around about 84% were members of AWERB, so we have a good idea that they knew what they were talking about when they were answering these questions. So next slide, please. So this was the breadth of responses that we received, round about 50-50 balance between academia and other types of establishments. So again, a good broad cross-section of responses. Next slide, please. This slide is just to demonstrate to you the responses and the countries where we got them from. The larger the print that you can see, the more responses were received from that country. I do find it quite interesting at this point to point out that Scotland chose to devolve itself from the UK, and maybe the football this evening's got something to do with that, but we'll see what that score holds for Scotland. As you know, I'm speaking from Scotland, and we've got sunshine here, which is very unusual, let me tell you. Thank you. Next slide, please. So there were 4 main questions that were asked within this, and this was based obviously on the tasks of the AWERB. And we've touched on some of these already, of course. So the 4 main things that were asked, how was the AWERB performing the following tasks? Advising the staff on matters related to the welfare of animals, how they were cared for, what, single housing, environmental enrichment, where they came from, obviously topics like that. Advise the staff on the application of the requirement of the 3 Rs through the life of the license, and keeping everybody informed. Establish and review your internal operation processes as regards monitoring, reporting and follow-up in relation to the welfare of animals housed. And then follow the development and the outcome of projects. How are they doing? How are they being refined? Thank you. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, these were summarized. So the answer was between 5 and 6 on a scale of 0 to 7, 0 being not at all effective to 7 being highly effective. So the rating of 5 appeared most frequently. So generally all the respondents felt that their AWerbs were functioning fairly effectively, which is good to see. Next slide, please. So I found this one really interesting, and we've just had a very interesting discussion about rehoming. From establishments that rehomed animals, they didn't rate their rehoming scheme very highly. So I think this one would be fascinating to explore further. We have a rehoming policy at Strathclyde. The photographs that you can see on your screen are of animals that have escaped my facility, if I could put it like that. It's lovely to see the animals be released. It's lovely to see them as pets. It's great for a culture of care. It's fabulous for the animal technicians and animal caretakers to see this and be involved in animals. So I would really strongly advise people, if you've not thought about it before, please do. Next slide, please. So when the data was collated, you can see that there appears to be a slight difference in the performance of the AWerbs for the tasks, with the CROs perceived to be performing better than academia. And therefore you wonder, do CROs have something that they could be sharing with academia to improve our efficiency potentially? Or perhaps it is just that they're in a business environment and they are generally more efficient than an academic university department. Thank you. Next slide, please. So this was an important question to be asked. Do you feel the AWeRB is taken seriously at your establishment? And there were 104 respondents, full response on this one, that yes, it was felt it was taken seriously, but there was room for improvement there, as you can see. Next slide, please. So do people understand what your AWeRB does at your establishment? And obviously the response here was just below 5. So there was some awareness, but not good awareness externally. I think we miss a trick with our AWeRBs promoting what we do. Especially among the public and among our institutions. I think people would be surprised externally to find out the lengths that we go to ensure the animals in our care are looked after as well as they possibly can be. Next slide, please. So this next question, senior management at your establishment support and empower you and provide adequate resources. You can see from the response at 5 here, there was support and empowerment to a certain extent, but again, room for improvement. Money is always obviously an issue when you come to questions like this. Thank you. Next slide, please. So obviously important for EFAT to think about, are animal technicians and care staff involved in your AWeRB, and do they attend and participate meetings? So there was obviously quite a lot of participation, but not full participation, which is probably where AWeRB could maybe try and push and help technicians and care staff increase their profile to be included in these meetings, because I think it is very important. We are the people that see the animals every day. We know what a normal animal looks like, and we know when that animal isn't feeling quite right. And we would pick up things, I think, that other people not seeing the animals every day won't necessarily see. Thank you. Next slide. So this was very good to see that 82% or nearly 83% have a designated veterinarian as a full member. So that's really, really good. Slightly concerning the 3% that had no involvement at all. I think it's very important for vets and technicians to work together as a team and support each other, as well as the scientists. I think it is all about teamwork to get it right. Next slide, please. So there were some free text boxes included at the end of the survey. And this first summary slide is basically a selection of what works well. So you can see that when you have the support of management, involvement of animal caretakers adds an extra dimension and a breadth of knowledge. To have 3R seminars to disseminate the research in the establishment is always useful. To make your AWeRB meetings informal, inclusive, allowing people to have good discussion. And a cross-section of professionals and an interesting agenda make for better discussion. So these were some things that people felt worked well. Next slide, please. Then this was any obstacles, and part of this is going to form the ongoing workshop that Penny, I think, is going to take you through next. So old habits die hard, changing a mindset. When we think about the refined handling methods, they have been around for quite a while now, and I think some people are still thinking about uptaking them or not convinced by the science when it's very much there. Asepsis technique, you know, I've always done it this way, I've never had a problem. That's quite a difficult one to change. The old enemy of time constraints, we all have other busy jobs to do, but also time to support and guide people. One establishment said there was a blame culture rather than time to support, rather than sit down and talk it all out together. Training came up a few times, a lack of training for AWeRB members to understand what their remits were, and the requirement for more guidance for AWeRB as well. So next slide, please. So really, this is just to summarize the points that I've been through, and a lot of which were already mentioned and touched upon in the first really good presentations we've seen earlier on this afternoon. The positive aspects, most people rated their AWeRBs highly for achieving the key tasks, and many AWeRBs have veterinarians as full members and animal technician involvement, and there was a good outreach and discussion. But the challenges, which we're going to go on to talk about, there's still a lack of support and guidance. How do we improve that? There's not enough training for AWeRB members. Finding time to participate can be a problem for people, and some believe that the AWeRB should be taken more seriously. Worryingly, some of the scores, of course, because what we saw were collated scores, were 1 to 3 for fulfilling the tasks, which really isn't acceptable at all to any of us, I would think, on this meeting. So I'm going to hand over to Penny now, who will hopefully more accurately than I have done introduce you to the workshops. Thank you very much, everybody.
That was great. Thank you ever so much, Linda. So that's really helped to set the scene for this discussion. So we're going to have a panel now. Some of you may have had agendas that said we were going to have breakout groups, but we were really a victim of our own success, and there are too many people for that. So what we're going to do is have a panel discussion, and we really strongly encourage you to put your questions in the Q&A box, please, and we will do our best to answer those. I've picked out, so Tatiana or Amelia, could you share the screen, please? Because we've got 2 slides with questions on. Basically, I thought we could split this session into 3. There are 2 sorts of generic questions. There we go, there's the first one. There are 2 sorts of generic questions. And then the third question, I'm going to put up a poll for you to decide which task you'd like to troubleshoot with the panel. And we'll just see how it goes. If you're really enjoying talking about questions 1 and 2, I'm not going to hold up the discussion. This is very much your meeting tailored to you. So this is the first point that I pulled out of the responses to the survey, because obviously Linda showed you a slide with selected sort of representative quotes from people who filled out the survey. But looking at all of them, it was really obvious that many of the challenges that people were struggling with related to the status of the animal welfare body, particularly the level of support and human resources, such as secretariat, meeting rooms, just people's time that it receives from staff, including senior management. So as there are a huge spread of people with different roles and from different countries here, I just thought it might be interesting to have a discussion on what people with different roles can do to improve things if this is an issue at their establishment. So to begin with, would any of the panel like to comment on that before the questions start coming in, or comments? What do people think? Certainly, personally speaking, I think that scientists could certainly do a lot to help improve the status of the animal welfare body within a research establishment. Obviously, I'm speaking mainly from a UK AWERB perspective here. Some scientists are very supportive of the AWERB and are keen to engage with it and to support its initiatives and to acknowledge that it can improve science, animal welfare, reduce reputational risk to the establishment, etc. And other scientists can be much more negative and view it more as an obstacle that gets into their way and restricts their academic freedom. So I think if scientists were more supportive of the animal welfare body and were more vocal in that support to senior management, I think that would help it to be taken more seriously. What do other people think?
Yes, and not only scientists. I think in principle, all AWB members are very motivated to be in the AWB because they were never forced to join that. But it is important, I think, to have also senior people in that in the animal welfare body. So people really with a lot of competence and expertise in specific matters, and this will also help to increase the authority of the animal welfare body.
Yes, we've got. Sorry, go on.
Okay, and I think that having the tasks that we do have in the animal welfare body, it can easily be perceived as a controlling function, which it is to a certain degree, but the way that we usually have success with this is that we speak to the scientists and say, yes, we need to be in compliance, and we are here to help you to be in compliance. So instead of just being a pain in the neck, then actually helping people say, you should think of this, we can do that, work along with them instead of being on each side of the fence.
Something we, let's say, we can see with the animal welfare body, they are doing a really great job everywhere. So that's really a key aspect. But most of the time, the quality of the job is not well known. So I think it's really a part of the animal welfare body to promote what they are doing and the improvement which has been achieved. And that's also important to get support. So it's really to start a virtuous circle and try to work on continuous improvement. But if there's no real internal communication on the positive aspects of the animal welfare body, this is only perceived as a controlling body or oversight body.
Mm-hmm. I'm hearing there are two hands up amongst the participants, but I can't actually see them. Kirsty, who's got their hand up? Oh, I see now.
Now there's only one. So there's Perrine. So Emilia, can you be?
No, Nairi.
Perrine.
Yes.
And then we have France. There we go.
Okay, I see. Yeah, Nairi.
So I was just going to add to there's a comment in the chat from Anna Olsen, which I agree, which is part of the issue in academia is that there's a lack of recognition for stuff that's done for the common good. So basically, there's no real benefit to being on an animal welfare body for a lot of scientists within academia. It's another job that they don't get any credit for and gets in the way of their research to some extent. That doesn't mean that I don't think there are some fantastic people on an animal welfare body. There are, and the scientists who are involved are very keen and get involved. But I think there's a bigger cultural piece there within academia to actually recognise, the importance of this actually for things like reputation and everything else. And I think that's possibly done better in pharma and CROs where company reputation and also where things done for the general good, I think, are better recognised.
Yeah, thank you. Just before we go on to Sally and Samuel, there's a couple of nice points in the chat. So Hugh Simmons says they've got buy-in from the science director, who's arranged that a scientist from each science department has a 3-year rotation on the animal welfare body, which has given the animal welfare body more reach and developed the culture of care. I think that's a really nice idea to rotate them on there so that they can get a better understanding. Anne Moore says in academia, possibly relieve part of the academics' time commitment to create time to enable them to promote the animal welfare body across the university to further support driving collaboration between the scientists and the animal welfare bodies. So those are two nice hands-on ideas for sort of creating an involvement that will hopefully lead to better things. Samuel, did you want to say something?
Yes, thank you. Well, because well, it is something that I regularly say in animal welfare body workshops. Of course, it is really easy to have animal welfare body with specialists in animal welfare and specialists in animals in particular. When they start to be really relevant and useful, when scientists really come and explain also to them what is their job, what is really their scientific purpose and scientific thematics, and regularly expose also the outcome of the studies. It's very important because the animal welfare body can also be part of this communication chain, which is really positive because you also work better when you understand why you are working. And you really, because in some platforms, very big platforms, you sometimes lose the contact with reality. And sometimes you only work either for research or either for animal welfare. And it's very important to be aware of what you're working for, what is the kind of scientific progress you are targeting, and then you are really better, for example, to implement the human endpoints because you know what you're looking for. And so the scientists have a very important role in this.
Can I comment on that?
Okay. If it's a comment, but we also have a hand from Perrine that we should hear, but if it's a comment directly to Samuel's, please go ahead, Monique.
Okay, yeah, I'd like to comment on it from my communications point of view. We've had the luxury actually in Utrecht that I, as a communications advisor, could be involved the full 6 years that the animal welfare body is existing now. And it's very important to have someone from that perspective involved. And sometimes it's in small things that you make a strategy to involve all the people that are that have to do with animal experiments in some way or another. And one of these small things is that we have a newsletter, an email newsletter each month, and I always write not the animal welfare body has done this or has to do that, or the researcher does this, but we want you to do this. We are going to talk to you. So make the threshold very low and make sure that you're always talking to the people very, very directly. And if you don't have a communications officer that is involved in your animal welfare body, I think you should seek cooperation with them within your organization, because that can really help to create the right culture.
Thank you very much. Sally, I haven't forgotten you, but poor Perrine has been waiting for ages. I couldn't see because I was in the wrong box. Is it possible to unmute Perrine so they can?
We have unmuted Perrine. It's for herself to now unmute herself and then she can speak.
Okay, please unmute and speak, Perrine. Sorry about that. Okay, perhaps Perrine, while you're figuring that out, I'll just come to Sally, who's also had her hand up. Sally.
Yes, I mean, I guess I was going to just sort of make some general reflections because, I mean, when we talk, we tend to talk with the experience of our own animal welfare body, don't we? And also we speak very generally. So I totally agree that I think it can sometimes be perceived that industry has this, we have a corporate governance structure, so that makes it a little bit easier for an animal welfare body to fit within that and be supported. But I don't think even there you can underestimate the difficulties actually of making sure that the animal welfare body is seen, visible and transparent. So I guess thinking about it, it always comes back to having some sort of local senior support at the site to really raise the visibility of the animal welfare body, and to be able to show, as we've all talked about, or even contribute to scientific progress. And obviously in doing that, perhaps it's through enhanced experimental design, working with scientists on some of their 3Rs things that are not about animal refinements, but actually about the science. I think doing that brings scientists into it, which again raises the profile.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you very much. Perrine, would you like to try and unmute now and ask your question? So we've unmuted you. You just need to unmute yourself. It doesn't seem to be happening, does it? I'm so sorry. Would you like to put it in the Q&A box? And I promise I will look out for it. There's another helpful comment from Sally in the comments box as well about open animal welfare body meetings, which I think is also a very good idea for engagement. Sometimes people get concerned about confidentiality, but certainly some bodies in the UK split their agenda so that they keep confidential or sensitive issues to a certain part of the meeting that's a closed meeting, and then they can open the meeting up later on. And that a number of establishments have been doing that for some time in the UK, and it seems to work very well. And there's also a helpful comment from Ellen in the Q&A box about lay members. So we find that lay members are incredibly useful for an outside perspective. You may know lay members as independent members. Do other institutes use this resource, and how do you find suitable candidates? What do you look for? Would anybody like to comment on lay or independent members on the panel? Obviously, from my organisation's perspective, we are 100% behind lay and independent members. We think they're a really useful sounding board and a different perspective to bring in to the decision-making process, provided that they are appropriately trained and inducted into the animal welfare body, and that they're sufficiently empowered and supported. But certainly in the UK, it can be difficult to find lay members. There's no sort of registry of people, so it tends to be more word of mouth, or sometimes people come to my organisation and ask for advice. Sally, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to support what you've just said. So I find, and maybe to put some context into it, but I think it doesn't make any odds on the size of the establishment, but we're a very small establishment. And actually our lay members and our independent member are really, I think, what makes the AWERB as good as it is, because they bring in completely different views and perspectives. And they also are the voice of someone that's not working in the animal unit and someone who's not a scientist. And therefore, you know, in some ways you can say that's the average view on the street in some ways, which I think is really helpful to hear. I think if you can get an independent member, our independent member is not lay, but has an interesting role outside in something called the Annex Research Group. If you can get someone who has some knowledge of the area, but works in an organisation that has a completely different perspective, I think that's also really very challenging and interesting to have. So 100% behind you, Penny. Really useful roles to have.
Thank you. Mark Cunningham, I can see your hand up. Would you like to say something?
Oh,
can hear you.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Oh yeah. It was just to say that at Trinity College Dublin, we appointed a lay member to our animal welfare board, and what we did was we approached a member of the college chaplaincy. So we asked one of the Methodist minister to sit on our AWB, and again, just sort of mirroring the previous comments, it's been very interesting and refreshing to have somebody as a lay member who doesn't have a scientific background, doesn't have a background in terms of using animals. And I think it's been really refreshing and useful to have that perspective. I think going forward, it would be great if we could get an independent member, and certainly that's something that, having heard about that now, we would like to possibly think about going forward.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mark.
Mark,
Mark, sorry, Thomas.
Can I ask you, Mark, you had a previous comment in the chat. It was after the difference between private pharmaceutical companies and academia, where you said you didn't quite agree. Would you like to expand on that?
It was more, I think I was commenting on the contribution of academics. I think one of the speakers had said that, academics just see this as another job. And again, my point was that I was disagreeing with that statement. I think probably we have thought very carefully about the people the academics that we appoint to our AWB. And we're perhaps trying to engage with scientists that have already got some kind of sort of buy-in already to welfare. So that was the comment that I was disagreeing with.
Thank you very much. And Penny, if I could just comment on the layperson perspective, during the COVID-19 pandemic, we replaced our layperson, and it has been very difficult for this new person to actually get onboarded, because we have sitting behind screens, we have been able to get some help on the technical stuff, but where the laypersons really, I think, have something to contribute with, this is when we go to in the facility and actually see the animals and discuss the models. So this has been a challenge, but hopefully we are past that.
I've got a couple of tips on that in my presentation later, so stay tuned. Marley has put a question in the question and answer box, which I see Thierry would like to answer. So Marley said they'd love some good tips on how to get management behind and empower the animal welfare body in countries where there are no legislative demands on animal welfare. Thierry, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, it's a good question, because it's really challenging, and I think you need to let's say adjust the way you manage the management in your institution. But some tips, it's when I want to convince people, I do not speak about animal welfare. I speak about their business, I speak about science, I speak about profitability, I speak about anything else but not animal welfare. Sometimes people are more sensitive to what is convincing, and I'm sure that the animal welfare body has some value when we speak about science, profitability, or business. So it's really a way to also provide the added value of the animal welfare body in the organization. So that's one of my tips. Another tip is to get some support from your inspector, but don't repeat it to anyone else. But sometimes they can be really helpful to, let's say, be more convincing about the obligation to have a more active animal welfare body. And that's a way to work also with the inspector, because that's their role to ensure the efficiency of the animal welfare body. So that's two tips, but it could be a real challenge. It could take time, and that's something which could be a long effort.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Nairi, you've been very patient, and then we'll go on to Susanna.
It's actually, it sort of goes for both of the last comments. So we sort of combine trying to encourage management buy-in with a layperson, in that within our institute, our animal welfare body is part of the court structure within the university, and it has to report to that. So we have a member of court who is within our animal welfare body, who is both lay and actually able to persuade management an awful lot about things like reputational risk and scientific integrity. So very much what Thierry was saying, that you're emphasising other aspects potentially rather than necessary welfare, which will impact more on the business case. But they're actually really good lay people as well, we find, in that they're very good at looking at big picture and strategy, and tend to come from a very different area.
Thank you, Nairi. Susanna, would you like to speak?
Yeah, just a very short comment. I actually loved when Samuel was saying about get your inspector involved, because if you look at the guidance document on inspection and enforcement, we talk about a lot there about inspectors' role in terms of assessing and helping culture of care. And if we look at the tasks of the animal welfare body, they are legally required tasks. So it is a perfect sort of a chain to, if you want to push a little bit harder, is to use the legislation as your BFF, like my teenage kids would say, sort of your best friend forever. Look at the legislation, what it requires, and discuss with your inspector when they're going to write the inspection report. We also talked about inspections just recently at our member state meeting because of the situation Vivotecnia in Spain, and we had a long discussion on how can we use the inspection process that we can identify this kind of issues before they explode. I mean, we should be able to attack them immediately at the start so that the culture of care is there and it pushes individuals into the same form instead of somebody coming from outside and managing to sort of change the whole structure and environment in an establishment. And one of the tips that one of the member states came up with was that they always look during their inspections the reports of the minutes of the animal welfare bodies, because it very quickly reveals whether it's something that's really functioning, which has taking initiative, which is coming up with ideas, how the ideas are followed up, or is it pure reports, we met so and so many people participate, great stuff, we meet again in 2 weeks. So I think there's lots of little tricks and tools that we should use, and use the directive as your BFF.
Thank you very much, Susanna. Pete, I see your hands just come up.
Yes, something totally different, but during the presentation, the importance was stressed of empowering your technicians, which I fully support. Well, one way to do it is probably done by many people in industry. We typically work with goals and objectives, and people are scored at the end of the year how they did their work during the year. We tend to include also, for instance, when people are delegated in an animal welfare body, we make sure that they also list this in their goals and objectives so that they really can get the necessary credits for the work they have done. So this might also be a good suggestion.
Yeah, that's very helpful. It's a great idea. Thank you very much. Susanna, is that your old hand up there? Okay. In that case, I hope you've all also managed to have a look at the chats and the Q&A box while we've been talking. There's a lot of information in there that I can't possibly read out, but I hope that discussion, that section of the discussion, has given you some ideas so that you can feel inspired to go back and think about how to champion and empower your animal welfare body. So, before we move on to the next question, Nairi, did you just want to add something?
It was just something that had come up in the chat. I think Mark had raised about engaging scientists. And one of the things that we do is we deliberately choose the people who are having, shall we say, sometimes struggling with the understanding of what the AWERB does, the animal welfare body does. We deliberately put them on because there's nothing like making them assess other people's studies and work to understand the problems we're having with understanding theirs. It's been remarkably successful in making them more part of the process.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So yeah, if your animal welfare body does project review, then that's another really helpful tip just to sort of diffuse things. Okay. So could we have the next slide, please, with the next question? Okay. So this is so I've also got the poll, and we can think about a task to troubleshoot depending on how long we want to spend on this question. So this is the second part of the discussion. So as Linda presented, it was interesting that respondents from academia rated their animal welfare bodies as less effective across all 5 tasks. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that academic animal welfare bodies are performing less well across all of these, but that was certainly people's perceptions. We thought that was a really interesting result. And we just wondered if anybody had any insights as to why they think this is. Anyone from industry or academia like to comment? Sally?
I think it's perhaps repeating something you already discussed, but I was at AWERB hub meeting. So for those that don't know, in the UK, we have a facility where AWERBs can get together and share things. And one of the things that came up was exactly about AWERB governance. And our chair obviously works in industry, was calling out, can't you quote this governance mechanism and that governance mechanism? And the chair of our sort of a big university, AWERB, said, no, that's not the way it works in academia. What makes a good scientist is not this sort of corporate buy-in and community. It's about their work and their egos, and that's what makes them brilliant scientists. Now, I just thought that was a sort of reflective comment on what was already said, that actually sometimes it's about industry having this sort of a role in the greater good for the business, I think, which I think is sometimes harder in academia when you're focused on your own research area. So yeah, that's already been said, but I think that is one of the points that will perhaps explain the difference. And there weren't big differences, were they? It wasn't like poles apart. It was just, they were quite close, but just a slightly bit lower in terms of, I think, the perception that academia seem to have of themselves doing slightly less effective animal welfare body work.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Sally. Samuel, what did you want to say?
Yeah, I guess a little bit, because I know a bit the two systems. What can be an explanation is that if you want to, in particular, achieve the third mission, establish and review operational processes, you need to have, I would say it is really helpful having a quality system with real implemented procedures, SOPs, and a process with a management, which is something that can sometimes be absent in some universities, still absent. So this is because you really have to have the animal welfare body working hand in hand with this helpful quality system. Otherwise, it can be struggling to achieve all these missions.
Thank you. Thomas, your hand went up next.
Yes. Anna Olson posted a message saying that academic institutions do not have a shared goal, a shared mission, and having a past working both in academia-like setting and in a private company, I can really recognize that. Academia it's more like herding a flock of cats just walking around with their tails up, whereas in a private company, it is much more easier to define and address a shared goal.
Thank you. So the overall impression I'm getting so far is that this is more likely to be a genuine phenomenon rather than just a perception, because of the broad difference in cultures between industry and academia. Nellika, I can see your hand up. You should be unmuted. You should be good to speak. Nellika? Okay, we can. Oh, should we try Vera?
Hi, Penny.
Oh, we got Nellika. Okay, thank you. What would you like to say?
Hi, thank you. I work in academia, and I think quality control is our big challenge in academia. And also, I really like the presentation of all these.
Nellika, you will have to speak up, but it's very, very in the background.
Okay, wait. Oh,
that's better. That's better. Go ahead.
Quality control is a real challenge in the academia, and especially with all these academics being raised in academia. There's not a big focus on quality control, so we need these technicians, and technicians are very dear. So to have a technician in your group is a real challenge for most institutes. So I think that is also a challenge for us as animal welfare bodies.
Right. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Vera, would you like to go next?
Yeah, well, I think I'm also an academic. So with my tail high up and so on, I heard it. I was laughing with it. A cat with the tail up, very nice. But it is true that at a university we have a lot of egos. But I think it's not so. It's differently organized. The teamwork and the groups are not always that big. So you have small groups, you have bigger groups. We have one animalarium, sometimes not on the same campus, and it's a question of money also. Because when we have a vet, then he is responsible for about everything. And then the second vet, that is not payable. And I see that I'm often busy with animal welfare and so on. And I see that even now that we are looking for a communication manager, people ask me, yeah, but take a vet and so on, because that is then also good for animal welfare, and it can also be included because there's only one vet for the moment, and there's really a lot of work to be done of surgery and of all kinds of where he assists. So I think there are two reasons. The differences in size, the fact that it is not so much teamwork, and that it's a lot of about publications and about having your PhD and about your own a person that needs to get somewhere. And secondly, in general, if you see the budgets that universities have, small and big ones, I think that an extra vet is not to be underestimated, what that costs and who pays it. Then it is the faculty and faculty of medicine and of pharmacy then in our case. And but there are also in chemistry, there are also in other branches that there are animals used, and that comes then in one animalarium, and there is one person that has to pay it, and then you have the discussion. So it's not a simple one.
Thank you. That was helpful, and also that kind of comes back to the first question as well, doesn't it? The status of the animal welfare body, how seriously it's taken, and the amount of support that it gets.
Yeah,
I think
sure.
it really taps into that too. Okay, thank you. Michael Axelson, I see your hand.
Yes, thank you. I suppose you can hear me, and I couldn't have said it better than Vera before me, so I will just add a very brief thing, and that is that at the university in Gothenburg where I work, we have two parallel structures. We have one person who are responsible for all 6 animal facilities, and we have another person who is overall responsible for the university. And these two structures with all the different tasks run in parallel, and therefore it's also slightly difficult to get them to meet, because there are definitely parallel structures with different legislations that we have to look at. And adding that to Vera's description about team groups and so on, I think that makes the difference compared to pharmaceutical companies or smaller biotechnical companies.
Thank you. So I think we're hearing definitely hearing a common theme here. I think it'd be really helpful if we could have a think about what we could do about this. So personally, I think it's also a very good argument for having animal welfare body networks, because it can often be quite an eye-opener, quite a revelation for people who sit on animal welfare bodies at universities, to have discussions with people who sit on animal welfare bodies in industry, because they can see that they often get more resource, and there's this very different culture, and they're working towards these shared goals. And I think that can be quite inspiring and empowering for people at academic animal welfare bodies. So I think networks would be one approach to trying to equalize this a bit. It'd be interesting to hear what other people think. I'll just come to Sarah Richton because I see your hand was up, but if people could have a think about what we could do about this, that would be really helpful. Sarah, over to you.
Can you hear me? Great. Oh, yeah. Great. Okay. I just wanted to ask a bit more of a general question, because we're talking about this survey is more about the perceptions of effectiveness in animal welfare bodies. Is that correct? So
yes.
Isn't it a question that we should be asking about how people are evaluating the effectiveness of their animal welfare bodies, and if actually we're seeing that academics or academic organizations are perhaps evaluating the effectiveness differently to other organizations, and that's actually why the survey results are coming out this way.
Yeah, that is a distinct possibility, and I don't know how many animal welfare bodies actually have objectives and benchmarks that they evaluate themselves against. Perhaps you could put it in the chat. If you sit on an animal welfare body that has a system for evaluating how effectively you're achieving all the tasks, put a note in the chat and we'll see if we can get a feel for that. But that is a very good point. Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Anna, I think you're the next.
Yes, thank you. I think it would be interesting to know if the perception of status and effectiveness of the animal welfare body in academia will differ between universities or research institutions which have their own 3Rs research and those which don't. So I completely share the view that first Sally and then Vera shared on how academia works and why this is a problem, quote unquote. And I would expect that perhaps institutions where 3Rs is something that the institution itself wants to use as a flagship would have a different view of the animal welfare body, where they could be an ally and they could be part of making this really a flagship issue, versus institutions where this is not really something that anyone on leadership has any real idea of or any real interest in.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. That's a really helpful point. And I'm just looking in the chat as well to see what people are saying about benchmarks in terms of references. So some people are commenting that their animal welfare bodies have annual goals that they self-assess themselves against. We've got a comment about evaluating perception in polls, more on annual objectives. A regulator saying none of the AWERBs I inspect have any benchmarks. So there seems to be quite a wide variation in practice there in part. So perhaps that might be something to take away with you and to think about. How well is your animal welfare body performing? Do you have any evidence for that? And perhaps benchmarking and really looking objectively at how well you're doing might be an opportunity for you to call for more resource if you feel you need that. Just a thought. So Vera, is that a new hand or an old hand? It's disappeared. Oh, it's reappeared again. Vera, did you want to? Could we unmute Vera?
I was muted.
Hello.
I was muted. Yeah.
Okay.
What I wanted to say, but perhaps that comes further in the discussion. But okay, for example, my lab, we have an IC3R center. We develop alternative methodology and already for many years. But we see that as a part of animal welfare, because here you talk of different topics. But for me, the 3Rs and trying to have replacement methodology to develop alternative methods, my young people see that as being very active in animal welfare. So if you talk here of pain and of distress and homing, rehoming and all these things, yes, true. But I think a big part of it is also having efforts done at your university or in your research group for development of alternative methods. And that is something I haven't heard, but okay, can be that you say this is another topic, we would handle that in another workshop. But for me and at university, that is one of the biggest points where we work in for animal welfare, and that is development of alternative methods and using human materials and human cells and human tissues, because that gives a completely different schwung to your work, and that is then you don't need animals. That is the best you can have for animal welfare.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Thank you very much. I think replacement is very much the neglected R of the 3Rs among animal welfare bodies, because it's the most difficult and it needs the most expertise. But bearing in mind that replacement is the ultimate goal of the legislation, that really should be the ultimate benchmark. So that's an extremely good point. Thank you very much. I've forgotten whose order the hands went up in, so I'm going to go to Nellika before I come back to the panelists. You should be all right to speak, Nellika. I'm not hearing you. I can't hear you and it's all kind of disappeared. So do please put your hand up again if there was something you wanted to say. Sally, I think you were next.
It's perhaps just to say, and perhaps a bit of a shameless plug, but we were talking about assessment metrics, how the animal welfare body might be doing an effective role. And I guess I just want to point people to the FPA publication and the 5 category framework, because within that there are a whole set of good practice indicators, and the animal welfare body features very highly in large sections of that publication. So it's actually quite a nice way to look at and actually review your own animal welfare body and think, well, are we fulfilling that? Can we do that? Are there some gaps? Are there things we can improve? And that's certainly what we used at AstraZeneca. So I'm just pointing people to that publication if you want some thoughts on how you might be able to assess whether the animal welfare body is effective or not.
Yeah, plug away, Sally. Thank you. If you'd like to paste a URL in the chat box so people can find that, do please go ahead. I've just pasted one in there because I saw that somebody a bit further up mentioned the Home Office regulators document on identifying low-level concerns in animal units. And that's actually got a really useful appendix, regardless of whether or not you do have any low-level concerns in your unit. There's a really nice table at the end that's got some indicators of a good culture and good practice, and indicators that things might not be going so well, not necessarily from a non-compliance point of view, but just where the culture might be starting to slip. And I would really recommend that document for some good objective pointers for assessing how well the animal welfare body is doing as well. Thomas, I think you're next.
Thank you. Aurora Brønstad has posted in the Q&A, the thing that works for cats that are proud and independent is food. And I think the same is true for our scientist colleagues. It's just a different kind of food that we must think of. And a question to ask yourself is, if I was a scientist, what's in it for me? What is the animal welfare body? What does animal welfare mean for me? And one place to start, that's the paper that you, Penny, have published together with Tanya Bowden. I'm sure you can remember the title much better than I can, but it's also about getting friends.
Yes, it's the Culture of Care, How to Win Friends and Influence People document that Tanya wrote that encompasses all the kind of soft skills that you need, as in picking your moment to talk to somebody, even if you can't agree that you need to talk some more. And I think that might be referenced in the new FPA Culture of Care leaflet, if I'm right. So yeah, so that's really helpful. Thank you. And we've also, there's a separate piece of work. I'll put the URL in the chat box in a minute, that the RSPCA did, looking at specifically engaging scientists with the AWERB, which would also work for the animal welfare body. Because yeah, I think you and Aurora are quite right. People do tend to act in their own best interests. It's just a question of persuading them what their best interests are. Sally, is that a new hand?
Could I comment on that, Penny, please?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah. I think that we receive a lot of goodwill from the researchers because we keep evaluating the process with them. I know that everything we ask from them it's very hard, it's difficult, it takes time, it takes energy. So they don't like us, basically. But at the end of our workflow with them, we send them a poll in which we evaluate how they think the workflow with us was. And then they can comment on that. They can ask for, what we should do better. And then we really try to make things better for them. So I think that not only helps us to make the workflow better for everybody, but it also gives some goodwill, because they know we listen to them. So maybe that's a small thing you could add to your workflow, and that could give a lot of goodwill.
Yeah, that's something that a lot of the scientists on the working group we set up. So I've pasted the URL of the scientist engagement documents into the chat as well. So we obviously engaged with scientists when we produced that, and that was something that really meant a lot to them, just to be asked how they felt things went and how the whole process had actually made them feel and what they would rather was done differently. And they felt so much more engaged if people actually bothered to ask them that. So yeah, that's a really helpful point. So we've got a question from Delphine, who's asking, have some of you got a system of key performance indicators to measure the efficiency of your respective animal welfare body? We've sort of touched on that generally. Would anybody like to give any more focused examples of the kind of benchmarks or indicators that you use? I mean, there are some quite sort of process-driven indicators that some people use that relate to the amount of time they take to process applications, similar to a regulator, and it can be helpful to keep an eye on those just to help make sure that relations are good. Or there was one animal welfare body I used to sit on that used to look at fates of animals. So it would look at mortality rates, it would look at how frequently humane endpoints were implemented, it would look at animal wastage, and that was quite a good sort of hands-on way to look at how effectively we were working. Have anybody got any?
Penny, if I may try to address Delphine's question, it's a very complicated one, and one way it's with annual goal, it's really to look at achievements and to also celebrate the achievement during the year. So that's one way. Another way, it's also for us to look at ELAC accreditation, but also inspection. How many, let's say, findings we had at the end of the inspection or the site visit by ELAC. This is also an external assessment or external oversight of the performance of the animal welfare body. And the last suggestion, it's something we do on one of site, and it's very efficient. We have an annual interview between the chair of the animal welfare body and all the members individually, like an annual appraisal. So it's more a dialogue just to discuss about the contribution of all the members individually to the effectiveness of the animal welfare body. So it's a really open dialogue with objective, let's say, deliverables, but also if they need some training or more time, because sometimes because of your projects, you're less available. So it's good to discuss with the chair why you have less contributed during the year to the work done by the animal welfare body. So that's, let's say, several examples at different level of what could be KPIs for animal welfare body.
I think that's really helpful. I think as with trying to assess the culture of care, well, I think there's actually a lot of overlap between assessing the culture of care and assessing animal welfare body effectiveness. And I think you need a mixture of the objective and subjective, human-centered and animal-centered indicators along those sorts of lines. Pete, I think you were next.
Yes, thank you. Indeed, well, this session really stresses the importance, I think, of having these tools available. It's not always easy to do. A couple of other examples, for instance, we keep track of the number of post-approval monitoring visits because the AWB at our establishment tries to check each new experiment that is started. And in industry, you have more sometimes generic experiments, so this is more feasible to do. Also keeping track of what kind of incidents took place. Of course, what is your benchmark? What is your when are you successful? We compare that with the previous years so that we can at least keep track if there is some kind of an improvement. So this is something feasible to do.
Thanks, that's really helpful. And Sally, is that a new hand you've got there?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, I mean, I guess one easy way, which we've talked about, is to set annual goals. And we try and set them in the different categories that would support generally the work of an animal welfare body. So you obviously set one that's related to 3 Rs, maybe one that's related to openness, another one that might be related to culture of care. But I guess I just wanted to build on what Pieter's just said. So one of the things we do regularly is we log what we call our observations and events log. So we log events, so near misses and actual events, but we also log unusual observations. And so we're quite a small establishment, but in logging those every single year, we're able to learn from and take things forward. And what you can see is that you don't repeat the same mistakes by learning from all of these events and observations. So actually that's a good way of assessing effectiveness, because obviously if you learn and communicate and it doesn't happen again, you know you've been effective. So I think that's similar to what Piet was saying about logging incidents and investigating.
Yeah. Thank you, Sally. I think it's helpful also when it comes to the 3 Rs to break them down and look at each R individually, because they're all very different. They need very different skill sets and expertise to find out about and to implement. And in my experience, there can be a danger that people can talk about refinement and think they've been talking about all 3 Rs. I think that's a danger for animal welfare bodies as an entirety, to focus on refinement, because there's so much information about it. It's so easy to achieve, and you're in danger of neglecting the other 2 Rs and not properly monitoring your progress with the other 2 Rs if you focus too much on refinement. So I think it's good to have a separate indicator for each R, certainly. So I've been given permission to overrun a little bit if we want to, and you've probably noticed that I didn't go on to the third topic because everybody seemed to be getting so much out of talking about this one. So I'm just having a little look in the question and answer and chat boxes to see if there's anything else that we want to raise while we've got a few minutes. If anybody would like to ask any more questions, please put your hand up now and I will spot you and we will unmute you. Again, there's some extremely helpful comments that you've been giving us, so thank you very much for those. I think my key take-home messages from this are that there is a perception that animal welfare bodies can still be, obviously there's going to be a lot of variation, but there's still a perception that they can be under-resourced, under-supported, not engaged with as well as they might be. I think there is certainly a lot of merit in having these discussions, so that it's helpful to see, if some animal welfare bodies do receive more support and they're working in an environment where everybody's working towards a common goal, everybody supports the animal welfare body. I think it's really useful to think about why this is and see what learnings we can take home, perhaps if animal welfare bodies are not so supported. But it's critically important to really understand how well your animal welfare body is doing with respect to each of the tasks. Because if you understand that, then you can identify which key specific areas you need to work on. And then you've got a good case for going to senior management and asking for more support so that your establishment can comply with the directive, have an effective working animal welfare body, reduce the risk to the establishment, improve your science, all the benefits that we know so well. I think sometimes you need some evidence if you want to call for change. I think that's my key take-home message. So I hope that this discussion has given you some food for thought that you can take away and think about how you're going to benchmark and really get a feel for how well you're doing, so that you can fight for more for your AWEB if you need to. Have any of the other panelists got any comments they'd like to make?
Only that I can see that Anna Olsen has a hand up.
Oh, sorry, Anna, that's not showing up in my... Oh, it's because I'd scrolled down. Sorry, Anna, please go ahead.
Thank you. So I think this discussion on benchmarking is really interesting and really relevant. But as an overcommitted academic on an under-resourced animal welfare body, I would really appreciate some guidance on how that one introduces benchmarking and KPI monitoring without that being yet another task for which we don't have enough resources.
I would say that's a really good point, actually, and it probably doesn't just apply. It might be more important in academia than industry, but it applies to both scenarios because we all have other jobs. I think if you're prepared to put the effort into benchmarking, you can make it fairly. And so, I mean, we benchmarked ourselves against the FPA publication as an AWERB. That bit's fairly informal. It was a few hours work, but actually, what you have to accept that from that you will find gaps. And it's filling the gaps that's going to take the resource and the time. And I think that's the bit we just have to be aware of. We actually do create more work. And if you're already under-resourced, that can be a difficult thing. But I think, again, it's important to have done the exercise to at least make the case, because you might find there's a really key area perhaps for your establishment that would be really beneficial to improve that you could make the case for. And some of the others you just have to down prioritize and accept maybe they won't get done. I think we all have to be fairly pragmatic about things. But yeah. I think going through the exercise would give you some, if you like, evidence.
Yeah, a question of balance. Yeah, I agree, but I completely acknowledge what you're saying, Anna. Yeah, it's going to be very difficult for some people. Thomas, what did you want to say?
Just a piece of advice, getting back to the cats in terms of KPIs. I think you should choose those very thoughtful and find someone that the involved people can see that they actually bring value. So not just any KPI, but something that they really can see and appreciate that will help themselves, their science, and also the animals.
Thank you very much, Thomas. I think that's a very nice constructive note to end on. So let's leave it there. Thank you so much, everybody, for your contributions. I really hope you found that helpful. I know I certainly did. I assume, Kirsty, tell me if I'm wrong, I assume we're going to have a break until, say, 10 to whatever the next hour is, wherever you are. So I can see 41. So we come back at 50. Is that okay?
That sounds perfect. Absolutely perfect. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. See you soon.
Okay, so I think we've reached the time that we allocated ourselves. I hope everyone is back. Let me turn on my video before there we go. Before I start this final session of today, so the third of the 3 sessions, I'd like to just give a little bit of my feedback. I've been quite impressed with the level of participation and the questions and comments being made. From my side, you have to understand, I'm that lay person that you all refer to, and I can understand the sort of intricate concerns and challenges that each animal welfare body has to sort of work through, being it's through industry or academia. And I find this discussion has been quite useful and helping me also understand what the different participants go through, the different levels of discussions, and where sort of we need to put more focus on sort of taking up those challenges that we have identified and running through to lead it to something where we know that we can actually achieve more from our animal welfare bodies. Now, I'd like to just, as we head off here, so the focus of this final session, we can go on to the next slide, please. I've still got one from Penny. Next slide, please. And yeah, so the focus of today's session will be on that of induction and training of animal welfare bodies. So just to put this in perspective, one of the outcomes that came from the Commission's review of the directive on the protection of animals used for scientific purposes was that, you know, apart from the animal welfare body seen as being adequate and concerns over the resources, many of the respondents really highlighted the fact that they were quite concerned that there was no training for animal welfare body members relating to a number of issues, to specific tasks, including the understanding, for example, of the species involved, and also the requirements of the scientific research. Even skills on experimental design were considered to have been would have been helpful if there'd been some form of training. So today's session, this final session that we will go through, we will first hear a presentation from Penny, and then we will go into discussion where we've highlighted a number of questions where we'd really like the participants online to engage with us. So please already start to consider the types of questions you have. Please don't only take them up in the Q&A section. I'd really welcome in this final session that you put up your hand and we invite more people from the participants to speak and to share their views, because we'd really like to learn from you today. So with that, I will hand over to Penny. And next slide. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I'm just going to give you a walkthrough, some guidance that the RSPCA did with the UK Laboratory Animal Science Association, which is the UK member of FALASA, on induction for AWERB members. So I know that the UK AWERB has a longer list of tasks and a wider membership than the animal welfare body, but a lot of the tasks do map directly onto animal welfare body tasks, and the principles will also hold true for animal welfare bodies. So I'll do my best to say animal welfare body and not AWERB throughout. If I say AWERB, ignore me, I mean animal welfare body. Okay, so next. So as Kirsty said, training for animal welfare body members is an issue, and this came out in the 2017 review of the directive, training resources and having sufficient authority. So all of these things are still an issue today. That's been borne out by the survey, and there's a need for the development of training for members and opportunities to meet members from different establishments. And this has certainly been recognised as a current issue in the UK as well. Next. So this is the document that this talk's based on. It's a document that was produced, say, with the RSPCA and the Laboratory Animal Science Association. It's on developing induction materials. So we didn't produce guidance on a sort of a rigid training or induction structure, because we're very aware that every establishment is different. It has a different culture. It may be using different species in different fields of research and testing. So what we wanted to do was to produce some guidance that establishments and animal units could use to adapt to their own circumstances and produce materials that were appropriate for the members of their own animal welfare bodies. And I'm also going to touch on the document on the right-hand side, which covers all the kinds of things you need to think about if you're doing induction and training for animal welfare body members online post-COVID, which I think might also be helpful. So next. So our starting point for thinking about developing induction for animal welfare body members is, what do you actually need to do step by step? You need to identify the key knowledge and skills that each animal welfare body member will need. You need to think about appropriate methods for delivering them so that new animal welfare body members can understand how the body works. And you need to identify the best resources and approaches to achieving induction. So it might be a combination of existing materials that are already available, and you might have to produce some new resources like an induction pack. Next. And here's just a list of examples that that I've taken from the document. So my own organisation has produced, either by itself or with other organisations, some documents to help AWERB members and animal welfare body members. Your establishment might have its own animal welfare body handbook. You might allow new members to attend training modules for animal users. You might introduce them to other members and key staff, like the designated veterinarian and the people in Article 24. You could pair them with existing members in a buddy system, give them a tour of the animal unit, which is actually a must for all animal welfare body members more than once. Let them sit and observe meetings, let them attend meetings or encourage them to attend meetings like this one, for example. Next. So the main body of the document consists of self-assessment checklists. We thought this was probably the most helpful way to present the document, because it would encourage people to reflect on whether they were actually getting appropriate training in all of these areas, as well as providing guidance for establishments. So there are 3 self-assessment checklists. The first one is about understanding the functions of the animal welfare body. So you can see the list here. I won't read them all out, but it's all about what does the animal welfare body actually do? How does it fit in with the national legislation and the competent authority? What role does the national committee play? All these kinds of things. And what do I expect from the animal welfare body? Next. So moving on to part 2. That includes acknowledgement of the establishment's animal welfare body. All of this kind of knowledge is needed in induction. So again, you can see it's about who else is on the animal welfare body, how do I contact them, have I got a term of reference for the animal welfare body, do I know about the establishment's own animal use? This is very important to help understand the kind of work that the animal welfare body is advising on. How much work will it be? What lines of communication are there between the animal welfare body and other groups in the organisation? And very importantly, do I know what a culture of care is, how the animal welfare body develops it, and what the sort of local values, perspectives and resources are? Because obviously all of this is very important, and that's why the induction package is left quite neutral so that it can be adapted for individual establishments. Next. And then the final part is personal factors, the kind of soft skills. Thomas mentioned this earlier when he referred to Tanya's paper on how to win friends and influence people. I think all committee membership requires interpersonal kind of soft skills. Animal welfare bodies, particularly where you may be dealing with sensitive issues or sensitive people. So that there are some examples here where we would like people to think about what particular strength or skill they want to bring. whether they have realistic expectations as to what the animal welfare body can do and what they can achieve through their own membership. And if they're lay or independent, they may need to think about their own principles and whether they would feel conflicted. Are they prepared to speak up in meetings? Are they prepared to visit the animal facilities? And the final point there, we've certainly touched on in the discussion, does management believe that the animal welfare body is important enough for them to support membership, for example, by adding it into performance review? Next. I've just got 2 slides that set out some examples. I know this is a bit small, but this is just to show you what's actually in the document, because that was an edited version. So for each self-assessment question, here you can see, do I know the purpose of the animal welfare body and its tasks? You can see that we've just listed some ideas as to relevant information that already exists that could be made into an induction pack, and some local documents like the terms of reference document. So that could include, the national legislation, available guidance, locally produced documents, but this list would be adapted for the individual establishment and animal welfare body. Next. And just one more example. So this is from the knowledge of the animal welfare body section. The importance of understanding what the establishment actually does. And we've listed some examples of where to get the information. So there might be an establishment website. There are people you can talk to. So these roles that you see listed in the second bullet point correspond to Articles 24 and 25 in the directive, and of course visiting the animal facility. Next. So that was a walk through the document. As I say, we deliberately kept it brief because everybody is very busy and it's a guide that we want people to develop. But some other useful resources include the guiding principles document that the RSPCA did with LARSA. Again, this is for AWERBs, but you can pull out the functions that apply to your own particular committee, and they're very useful self-contained chapters there. Also, the document in the middle, the European Commission working document for animal welfare bodies and national committees, is really helpful. I think this series of documents is extremely good and they can often be forgotten about. So do please revisit that and encourage people to do that as well. And there are a lot of reports and resources to help with animal welfare bodies at that URL there for the RSPCA Science Group. And when you get the PDF with the slides from all of these presentations, those will be live links for you to click on. Next. And then I just wanted to mention the online induction document. Again, you can probably just sort of see and scan this table. I won't read the whole thing out. It's a one-page document that we produced after holding one of our AWERB UK meetings, which we hold with scientists, animal technologists and lab animal vets in the UK. So we held a meeting looking at issues with actually holding AWERB meetings online. And as an offshoot of that, we produced a single side of A4 to highlight issues with online inductions, because this is clearly going on post-COVID. And so, for example, visiting the animal unit, the row there by the blue arrow, people are doing things like offering virtual tours of the facility. So they're putting on a GoPro or some other kind of camera and walking around the unit, and people can say, go in that room, I want to see this, can you talk to this person? So as with this kind of meeting, there are technological solutions to quite a lot of this. So that might be useful. And again, we'll give you the live link so you can have a look at that after this meeting. Next. There, I just wanted to, this is my final slide, and I just wanted to acknowledge all of the authors of the induction guidance document who came from a range of different establishments and roles and organisations, and helped to produce what I think is still a very useful document, which I hope will help you too. And that's the end from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Penny. Always very enlightening. I would like to kick off the panel discussion, but before doing so, what I would like to do is ask all the participants in the chat give me some sort of indication, let me explain. Susanna, when she was discussing earlier, or when she spoke up, she said make the directive 2010-63 as take it as your BFF, so your best friend. Looking at what Penny has just shown us, she indicates also the guidance that exists on animal welfare bodies that was developed by the Commission and the member states. Now, this guidance exists on the Commission website. It's been there for going on for 9 years now, still very valid with what's inside it. Now, this guidance is available in all EU languages. I'd like to just see a sort of pile of hands coming up, or people saying, you know, were you aware of this? Were you aware the guidance existed? Were you aware it's available in your own language? It's interesting to see people who may not have been aware of this until this time. So please, just giving it half a minute, it would be good to see some comments coming in through the chat option, please. Okay, some of you can't see it, but some people are writing only to the panelists. If you do, try and write to both panelists and to the attendees so people can get a clearer view. A lot of yes, yes, yeses came through to the panelists only. Okay, while you continue to write that, it is quite interesting to see that there are quite a few no's coming through. And I expect also with, excuse me, with some of those that are saying yes, I still believe there was one comment made by Louise where she says yes, and we use it. I find that's the most important aspect of it. A lot of people are saying, continue to say no. I see people saying yes, but they don't use it. As a sort of a start, and I know we're talking mostly about training, but you know, this is one of those sort of tools that we do have. We have it available to us. We have it extremely accessible to us. The fact that we can just click offline immediately to get it on the off the Commission's website. We can get it in our own languages. And I think that's what is essential to as a sort of a starting point to be taking forward within proper functioning of an animal welfare body. So just on that note, and thank you to everyone who has responded in the chat, but it has been a bit of an eye-opener. I expected a lot more yeses. I see a lot more no's that I did not expect. And I also see a lot of no's coming from both academia and also industry. So it's across the line that people are not aware of this. So I would ask maybe one of my panelists if they can go online and find the Commission's web link. Otherwise, I will do it while we're discussing and just put it in the chat so people have access to it and can access it after the meeting. So on that note, we had put together 2 sets of questions that we would really like to hear your feedback on. So this is why I'm going to be asking you to please, yes, do ask questions. I see only 2 have come through momentarily, but please, I'd request to make it more engaging and that I ask you to put up your hands so that we can allow you to join in the conversation. The 2 questions, and please make a mental note of these because I will ask to close down the presentation so that we can see faces of people in the panel. But the first question is, what would a core syllabus for training animal welfare members look like? And then further to that, it would be what kinds of training materials and practices are available? Now, these questions are not only to those, I know a lot of people who've spoken today are well known in the field, let's put it that way. But I also know there are a lot of students online. And I would really like to hear from you also, what types of trainings would you like? You're going through the syllabus at the moment. And where do you feel you could have gained through various training options maybe for you? And then also those who are new to animal welfare bodies, where would you have gained, or where would you gain any experience in having certain types of training? So I'm going to ask Tatiana, can you please stop sharing the screen? Can I ask all those who are online, who are part of the panel, to put on your videos? And can I ask for some hands to come up? Otherwise, I'm going to look straight at the panel. On the first question, on the course syllabus for training, who would like to go first? Okay, let's go with Linda first. You'll have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you. It was really just more thinking about the current environment we're in and thinking about an animal caretaker or animal technician on the ground, possibly maybe not likely to have access to a computer. So that might be restricting their availability for involvement at the moment. And I also think that training now in the current environment is probably much more important than it ever was. And for people to just use all the guidance that's out there, spend as much time as they can, concentrating on the key issues that we've been discussing, really.
Yeah, I can add that it's not my expertise, so it's colleagues of me that are involved in training. But what I know is that they work together with other animal welfare bodies in the country and internationally as well. So it would be really, yeah, I think it would be sad if everyone would do this on their own. I think you can copy things in your education from each other and make these courses together. That's what I would like to add here.
Sally, do you want to build on that?
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say, I mean, you can see just from the discussions today how many materials and resources are already available. And I wondered, in an ideal world, if there was a way of bringing all those resources into a sort of structured training module that has learning outcomes and is accredited for Europe, across the board for Europe. Because there's so much material there, it's actually really about how it's then delivered and what the learning outcomes are. And, you know, I think making the most of the materials that there would be a really good starting point.
So let me turn to Samuel. FELASA offers guidance and trainings.
Yes.
What
yes,
are the considerations of taking up something with linked to the animal welfare bodies?
Yeah, I think it's completely something interesting for us, because let's say we had already meetings and even we participated in the national contact point meetings during the last one, and it was focusing on training. And during this meeting, there were a very interesting promotion on what was happening on the platform ETPLAS, which is very good, and where you have online material, very interesting, and that could be identified as some very interesting things for animal welfare bodies. What could provide as a bit, in other way, FELASA, it is what we already done for the severity workshops, which is something which is more interactive, and that could be done starting from a core group that could organize a workshop, and then the workshop can be organized on face-to-face, on smaller groups through the national associations. And this model was very useful, I think, and I don't know if you had the opportunity to attend the classification, severity classification workshops. And thanks to David Anderson and Dominique de Gries, David Smith, and I am forgetting some people certainly, they were at the initiative of this one. And now we have another core trainer group, very led, I think, I would make a mistake, so I prefer not saying names, but it is very interesting as a model, and we could certainly propose something if the community is interested on the same model. But it would be a complement of what is also existing as an online support. But at EPELAS, we have to say everything is in English. And that's why it is interesting. And the workshop classifications, the severity classification workshops were translated in every country, in Spanish, Portuguese, French. And I think it's very useful to spread the message for everybody.
Thanks, Samuel. I'd like to just add to that because, yes, I'm very much aware of the classification for the severity workshops and how successful they were. I know that they wwere also joined back to back with some conferences, of course, using the opportunity that people were available. So I know FELASA 2022 is coming up. So there we go, a first option of a possible first animal welfare body training to take place. But yeah, let's keep that on the cards. My understanding is for the ETPLAS platform, but please correct me if this is wrong. We don't have to, at the moment have any focus on animal welfare bodies per se.
No, not per se, but some material could be well, could be interesting. I see, could be interesting. Mm-hmm. But yes, it would mean for us having a connection, doing identifying what is available, and well, it is possible to have a team tailoring face-to-face workshop because it is what is most useful. I suppose that JV SOLAS or LASA or have such training courses. In Astal in France, we did this, and I participated to these workshops, and we were so successful. But I would not say it was face-to-face because sometimes I had more than 100 people coming and surprisingly, it was even until 2019 and early 2020. You arrive in a town in France, you organize a workshop for animal welfare bodies, and you have 100 persons, and you say, oh, we have so many persons not aware of what is, and you have very simple questions about how to lead an animal welfare body, what are the tasks, and how being successful, etc. So it was really, and I would have preferred having less people being able to give tailored and dedicated advices than having like this a big course or a big lecture. So there is a job for face-to-face training and practical trainings with practical cases, certainly. There is a place for this.
Which is very much aligned with the severity classification. I think there was a limit of 50, and I do think that that is the way to ensure a proper training takes place. I was just also thinking of another platform is NORCOPA is an excellent
very good
data source, and definitely we should approach so the Norwegian platform for alternatives to ask if maybe they can also bring the possibility of on their webpage of bringing all the different links and that together. Do you want to respond to that specifically, Tom? Or
yes,
yeah,
and I would support that because the NORCOPA website is sort of curated, as Sally mentioned. There's so much information, and you will get a variety of quality, but the advantage with the NORCOPA is that it has some kind of curated assessment, so you can trust that what is there is of good quality.
I couldn't agree more. I think it was Penny first.
Yeah, thank you. I think this needs some really careful thought because this is quite an unusual kind of training that's required. It's a combination of technical and legal knowledge and local cultural knowledge. And it's a combination. It also requires these sort of soft committee type skills that I've mentioned as well. I was really glad to hear Samuel talking about the importance of face-to-face training, because my organisation's done a lot of training for lay or independent members. And when you get them together, all they want to do is discuss. They would happily discuss case studies all day long. So I think it will need careful tailoring to make sure that it's meeting needs, and also that there's a good combination between people meeting somewhere to be trained, to meet other animal welfare body members and to sort of refine their committee skills, but also they'll need that in-house training. And it's really important for local establishments to take the responsibility for ensuring that they've set out an appropriate training package as well, in order to really get the best out of all animal welfare body members, not just lay members. And the flip side is that all researchers need to be trained about the animal welfare body. Certainly this doesn't happen properly in the UK, so the local module that should include information about the animal welfare body is not really done very well in the UK in my experience.
Okay, next we will have whose hand was up? First the panelists, and then I would like to invite Nuno. So just Nege.
Thanks, Kirsty. So I think I'm adding really to what both Samuel and Penny said. I think this isn't training in the sorts of numbers who go forward are very difficult for this. But it's also that actually the different members of the panel need some types of training which is similar, but some which is very different. So the RSPCA and AWEB UK, so basically the body in the UK that looks at animal welfare bodies, recently had a meeting. And one of the key things that came out of that was that it's really critical to have a chair who has got good chairing skills. Now, that's not an animal welfare body function as such. That's a soft skill that is essential, but without it, you can't get the body to function correctly. Similarly, I was recently looking at a designated veterinarian course, and they actually ran a piece on the animal welfare body where they were looking at what the designated veterinarian brings to the role within the animal welfare body. And that was far more successful in terms of the type of training by talking among vets than it would be talking among the general panel, because they're looking at things from different views. So I can see that it needs more than one type of training. It needs, if you like, a role-specific training, but it also needs a cross-panel training to understand what other people do and to work out how to network and get information from other people. So I think it's really quite a complex grid of training potentially. And equally, on the flip side of that, I think there's an element that you don't want to overtrain, in that if you want lay people or independent members, you want them to come with their ideas and their independence and being non-technical, rather than actually sort of training them so much that they think there's a particular expectation of their views.
I couldn't agree more. And just specific to the training, not just only of the roles, but also specific to the issues. So specific to the different tasks, or the specific tasks, and also to the specific species being used. I think training is valuable for that also in particular. What I'd like to do is I've asked Nuno to put up his hand so that he could give us an overview of what is ETPLAS. A lot of us, especially those on the panel, know exactly what we're referring to, but we do have still 300 people online, and I expect a lot of them don't know the specifics of what is ETPLAS. So to put you a bit on the spot, Nuno, but I know you never turned down the opportunity to speak, so please do explain to us.
That mean exactly. Hi, thank you for the opportunity. So ETPLAS stands for the Education and Training Platform for Laboratory Animal Science. It's funny that Damien in the chat referred to a one-stop shop for education and training, because this is exactly what ETPLAS aims to be, a one-stop shop for all things education and training for the EU, but also other European countries, and also serve as a reference for anybody that is interested. We have been developing a number of initiatives and documents and tools, and some include e-learning modules. One of them, for instance, is on Safari classification, another on project evaluation, and we would be happy to host third-party materials on animal welfare body training, and hopefully why not be able also to coordinate the making of these tools. So we are here to help, both in terms of hosting and welcoming any initiative and participate in any initiative in this regard. So visit actplus.eu.
Thanks so much, Nuno. And I do see that you have in the chat, so people please take note of the link. I see questions coming in through the no questions coming in. They've all been answered. Our panelists are too good. They type quicker. Again, back to the panelists. Nuno, you stay online if you wish to add anything in any of the other discussions, please do. And I welcome again, we have requested it on a number of occasions, please, to the other participants. Do put up your hand, do engage. We'd really, the idea to have training and offer training or to develop training, we would need to know that there's a want for it. So the more discussion around it, the more we understand that there is a need from people for training. And it would be good to also identify the specifics, like has already been mentioned, of where the training is lacking and where we can improve.
May I be a bit provocative?
Yes, you may, Nuno.
I think not only animal welfare body members have this thirst for training, but also it's the directors of establishments who should actually be receiving training, and the bare minimum would be in acknowledging the key role of animal welfare bodies. We have a problem in Portugal, which basically is something that is very positive and at the same time raises a number of issues. And it is that we also review projects at a local level. So what happens is that establishments see us more as a service provider for researchers, so that they can apply for an authorization for a license to the competent authority, a box that they can tick, and all the key functions of the animal welfare body sometimes, in some contexts, get secundarized. So the thing is, sometimes even animal welfare bodies see themselves more as an ethics review body of sorts than what they were originally intended to be doing. So this is what some of the training should be aimed at, in my opinion. To the heads of the facilities, of the establishments, of the faculties, to empower animal welfare bodies to acknowledge their role and to help them in fulfilling their tasks.
Thanks, Nuno. Penny?
Yeah, thanks. And yes, I agree with that, Nuno. I thought that was a really good point. I was going to make a much lower level point, just thinking about induction and training. I've sat on 4 animal welfare bodies, and I don't remember ever receiving any induction or training. And you could argue that I don't really need it, but that wasn't why I didn't get it. There just wasn't any. And talking to our lay members who come to our lay members forums, it's exactly the same for them. You know, one was given a dictionary of biology and told, there you go, that's your training. And I wonder whether people might feel motivated after this meeting just to find out whether there's any induction and training given for animal welfare bodies at their establishment. And if there isn't, I appreciate people are busy and resources can be limited, but even an animal house visit as a baseline would be something. If new animal welfare bodies were at least given a visit to the animal unit and given the opportunity to meet a couple of members of staff, that would be better than nothing. And looking at the list in our resource, you know, there are a number of resources that can be quite easily given to people to look at that are much more user friendly than a biological dictionary. So maybe if people could be motivated to go back and just see if they could achieve just a couple of small things for induction for new animal welfare body members. I think that would be a start.
Thanks, Penny. Just to get people going before we lost Najia. I thought your hand was up. It's gone down. Okay. Just
it is up. Sorry, I'm having problems with my IT. Got crashed out. I was just going to agree with Penny. I think there's nothing like doing an animal welfare, doing a visit to the animal house. I think it's a critical thing. You can't function as an animal welfare body member if you don't know what the animal house looks like and you've never been there and you don't understand the facilities. So I would say it with Penny on that. That's an absolute basic thing that you need to do.
Thank you. I'd like to ask, people are a bit quiet, a bit shy, it seems. So I'm going to ask in the chat function, if you could identify and just either type out, I don't know if there's a way to say that people like the chats that they see. Sometimes we can do that, but to identify the areas that you would want to have training or where you feel there is a need for training. It'd be good to have a look and see what people are themselves thinking about or considering. I see there is one question in the Q&A. It's on, can we imagine an interactive website on the 5 animal welfare tasks on which everyone could share ideas for improvement, projects carried out, etc. For example, National Association created for the experienced animal rehoming. Anyone want to answer that? I take it for experience on animal rehoming. I do know that I think if I'm correct, the National Committee for the Netherlands has a paper that gives advice on rehoming, for example, and that's one example of something that could be included. Any comments on that question?
Oh, of course, every kind of resource is welcome. It could be easier. It is something that could be also achieved through specific, meetings or, well, a European meeting is of course difficult to organize. But when you have this kind of meetings or sessions, exactly the one that you organized today, of course, I think we harvest many ideas, many good examples. And first, this is a very good first step. Then I think it will be more difficult archiving and registering such examples like with a database. To have people volunteering for this would be more difficult, I am sure. But why not having regular meetings like this one, exactly? Because I suppose that we will be able to access the slides, no? So it will certainly be very interesting for us, and the next one will be also interesting. And every time we have this kind of meeting, we harvest very good ideas to bring back home and to implement in our place.
Thank you, Samuel. And just to add, I am already aware that there will be a couple of sessions at the World Congress on alternatives to animal use, which will be a virtual conference at the end of August and September, beginning of September. So there are already a couple of sessions there, and animal welfare bodies and people online here will be taking the lead in those sessions. And I also know for FELASA 2022, there's discussions of various sessions too. So as you're saying, just leading on from your comments, Samuel, there's definitely opportunities to take the story further. And I can see people are agreeing with you in the attendees.
Every initiative for FELASA 2022 will be really welcome.
And I think additionally, the national platforms are very important. In the Netherlands, this role is actually played by the Animal Welfare Body platform, and I think in Belgium as well, maybe in France, I heard a bit about that. So, and when they start communicating on a European level, I think that we have a nice structure, and that would work out fine, because you have some national issues that are different in another country. So I think it's best in the first place to talk with your national partners.
Mm-hmm. If I may, let's say the mission of the animal welfare body is very large and very diverse from one unit to another unit. So it's really challenging, because one size does not fit all. So I think it would be great to have like a training with the basics, where everyone agree, and maybe that's something where the European Commission can help with the development of e-modules. And I know that there is a list of priorities to develop e-modules, and that could be a way to achieve or to address the question which has been asked. But the second point, it's because it's very diverse, the objective is really to give to everyone a broad culture about all the tools they can use. So it's like a toolbox where in your place you can use the best tool, and that's more thanks to this kind of webinars that we can enlarge the expertise of animal welfare bodies. So it's really, if everyone has a good basics, the good fundamentals, then we can build upon better expertise.
Yes, Terry, you build on some very interesting points there. So I asked people to put in the chat and what they felt and the training was needed. Now, it was quite surprising that both from veterinarians, from academia, and I see the same response of replacement. But I'm going to hand over to Penny, because she's given quite an interesting comment on replacement and the difficulties in training an animal welfare body here.
Yes, because often, sometimes people seem to think that the animal welfare body should be able to identify a replacement for animal use in particular projects, if it reviews projects, or a replacement for animal models that are used at the establishment if they don't review projects. And that's not really very realistic, is it? You need very expert knowledge and experience to be able to know how to search for and to identify a direct replacement alternative. So for me, I think it's more constructive if animal welfare body members can be trained to ask the right kind of questions of scientists if they review project license applications, or if they have that dialogue with scientists, and just know how to create the kind of atmosphere where scientists are actively encouraged to seek replacements, and they're given the resource and the space and time to search, and it's an expectation of them. And if there is an alternative and they would need training in order to use that non-animal technology, they would be supported in receiving that training. So it's all about understanding how to create that culture and how to create that environment, and how to push and encourage and facilitate, rather than thinking, right, that model could be replaced with this non-animal technology. I think that's what the training really needs to achieve.
Thanks, Penny. In the meantime, Anna put up her hand. So Anna, please. And I also see you've made a comment. So if it's in line with that or not, please do bring up both issues.
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry, because I had to drop out and got back in right in after you mentioned, Kirsty, the sessions in the conferences. And I just wanted to say, with my FELASA Scientific Committee co-chair hat on, that we are open for session proposals right now, I think until the end of June. And animal welfare body networks would be a fantastic session, networking, or something beyond that perhaps would be a fantastic session for the FELASA conference. And we would really love to see that. I know that Penny has a foot in the door already regarding sessions. So that's one thing. And the other thing I say now with my, as a researcher and animal welfare body coordinator, the kind of guidance that Penny just posted about in the chat on how to, and mentioned how to ask questions about replacement, is something that I personally would value immensely, because I don't know how to do this, and I think that I may not be the only one.
Penny, you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Anna. If I could magic that guidance into existence, I would do that. It would be very difficult to, well, not impossible, but it would require a lot of work to put together. Yeah, it would be lovely if there was guidance like that. And I was just going to mention about the animal welfare body network idea for LASA. So Delphine, Thomas, and I are thinking about putting something together, prompted by Delphine, and we were actually waiting to attend this meeting and hear what people had to say before we did some more work on that. So we will be putting that in soon.
I see a number of questions or messages have come through in the meantime. I haven't been, it's difficult to keep an eye on everything. I don't know. I think it's more in agreement to what you're saying, Penny. People saying, yes, keep working on it. They absolutely agree with the need to have an atmosphere or culture where there are no silly questions. And I can only agree with that. There's always a question we feel we need to ask, and we mustn't feel that it's too stupid to put forward. On that note, unless I'm going to just hand back to the panelists. Would anyone like to bring up one final comment before we actually wrap up for today?
Well, I like a lot of the comments made already, and the example of the replacement for me illustrates again that the aim of a training syllabus should not be to make experts of the AWB members, but really there is need for a core module, but for the specific expertises, members should go to, well, they should find out by themselves. Replacement is something totally different from statistics, from being an expert in blood sampling techniques. So a training module cannot cover all these aspects and should really focus on the core business.
Anyone else wish to make a comment? Okay, then just to close off, my general conclusion from the discussion we've had now is definitely that we mustn't reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of literature, there's a lot of guidance out there, and we need to look at ways to bring it together, and then identify from that where the specifics in the training is needed. I agree quite deeply with Pete's comment about, yes, we do not want the animal welfare bodies to be experts. Then we don't have lay people anymore because they're experts in everything. But definitely it's about understanding the core needs, and it's about covering the 5 tasks, for example, that we have discussed here today. Now, I've received a message that my colleague, Tatjana, she may not be able to bring up her screen again. I'm going to ask her to try to just let me know if she can. If it doesn't come up in the next minute, then I know that she's not well connected. There we go. So I'd like to go to the final slide. And before I hand over to Penny to really close it off, and I wrote a few things down, taking note of the discussion today. And I think one of the standout things is really the number of people who stayed online. I mean, it's been quite consistent at quite a high number, and it really shows the interest across the board of this issue. I've been impressed with the engagement, the level of questions that have come through, and I've also been quite impressed with the speed that the panelists have been responding to the questions, not just verbally, but mostly in written form online. So we've been able to cover all the questions that have been put forward. And yeah, this is, so we've had in a way 2 parallel discussions going on, keeping to the same topic, but making sure that we try and cover as much as what people wanted to know and also what people wanted to share. Just some quick reminders from myself. Just to remind you, we launched the FPL on culture of care. Please do find it online. As Sally has mentioned, we will look at also putting it into a poster form so people can put it up in their laboratories. The meeting today has been recorded, so we will put that as soon as we can on the FPA website. Also, I expect we'll be able to also a link to the presentation deck that we had running today, so you will be able to access that. And just as a final from myself, you've seen a number of faces today from the panelists. I'd like to say thank you to them very much for their level of engagement, but they're also people who are behind the scenes. So I'd like to thank very much my colleague Tatiana for leading us, first of all, helping with the registrations and leading us through the presentations. And then to Amelia and Sophie, your help today with the communications, with making the presentation, the webinar was working, has been most welcome. So thank you to you. Now I'd like to hand over to Penny. And it's not over yet. We still want something from everyone online. So please don't sign off. We have just please give a bit of your time. Yes, over to my host.
Thank you very much, Kirsty. Before I get people to put take-home messages in the Padlet, I need to check whether I can share my screen because it's been disabled at the moment. So Tatiana or Amelia, will I be allowed to share my screen, please? You'll see, while we're just looking at that, you'll see in the chat box, I've put a URL to a Padlet. I don't know whether you've got experience of Padlet, but if you click on it, it will take you to a different screen that looks like a cork board, and it's got a pink circle in the bottom right-hand corner. And if you click on that pink circle, or if you click anywhere on the cork board, you'll be able to put a message anonymously on the Padlet. And what we would really like you to do, oh, I can do it, fantastic. Okay, oh, you've done it already. Oh, great, thank you. So yeah, this was my point. I hope everybody's got it and is able to contribute. So it would just be really nice to see what your key take-home messages are and what you're going to do as a result of the meeting. And if you can put those on there, we can actually download this as a PDF, and we can share this with you when we send out all of the materials. And you can also like people's comments as well if you want to sort of vote them up and down. So there's some really nice comments on there, and I would also echo everything that Kirsty said about the level of engagement today. It's just been fantastic, and it's really been wonderful to be able to bring you all together from such a wide range of establishments and a wide range of roles, and a wide range of countries as well. I think my key take-home message would be just to please think about doing something small. As we've highlighted, we're all very busy, and the idea that you're all going to be able to go off and demand more resource for the animal welfare body and full induction programs for everybody, of course, is not going to be realistic apart from a very lucky few. But just the idea of doing something small, arranging a visit to the animal unit, asking for some resources to be handed out, maybe just getting together a few of you and making a case for more support from senior management for the animal welfare body, or trying to engage with the scientist, having a look at Tanya's document. Just a few small steps could be the way to making a real difference. These are jumping around quite a lot, but I can see people are talking about improving transparency and communication. They're going to look at the resources, take care of details. looking at different levels of organisation of the animal welfare body among different member states. I think we heard quite a lot of positive comments about the potential for animal welfare body networks nationally, at least. Better promotion for training resources need to be brought together and promoted. ETPLAS as a possible channel. I like the idea of opening part of the animal welfare body meetings to the internal public. Every animal counts. Lovely, of course they do. That's what it's all about. Improve our induction pack. Right, this is not reinvent the wheel. Yes, somebody's picked up on Kirsty's comments. And yes, there is a lot of work to do, but I think there's some really great ideas here. And there are just too many to read out. I think that's an amazing spread of positive comments, and we'll share them all with you. So I think on that basis, you can carry on typing. I'll leave that up there for a while after the end of the meeting, so you can finish whatever you're typing. And I think, Kirsty, I think it's a little bit early, but I don't think people mind meetings finishing early, do they?
No, not at all. And I was just looking at one of the comments about, there's still a lot to do. And being a South African, of course, I always find a moment to quote Nelson Mandela. And he mentioned it seems impossible until it's done. And by putting in the effort, by having engagements and interactions like these that we've had today, there's so many people from so many backgrounds and so many different languages and expertise, definitely is the step forward. So thank you to everyone for your participation. Thank you for being here. And I wish you all a good weekend.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Cheers.